IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. Y'all know who we are. Let's get rocking and rolling. We're going to talk some recruiting today, Mr. Roberts. We are going to first dive into the commitment of Anthonie Knapp to Notre Dame. We were going to do this show last night, but they said he was going to commit at 5:30. He ended up committing at 4:30. So we decided to just stick with our IB Nation Sports Talk show and then do this show today. So, Ryan, we're going to talk obviously about Anthonie Knapp. We're going to talk about him as a player. We're going to talk about where he is for Notre Dame. We're going to dive into a lot of different things. What's next when it comes to offensive line recruiting? And then we're going to preview this weekend's visit. I think it's a big weekend for Notre Dame, another big weekend for Notre Dame. When you look at the recruiting list of people that are going to be on campus this weekend, we'll dive into that. Some big-time 2024 players on campus, and also some real – well, I'd say there's some good 2024 players on campus on one side of the ball and some potential studs on the other side of the ball, and a couple really good 2025 players, including one of the top quarterbacks on Notre Dame's board. So even though by April 1st, Notre Dame will have visits from two of their top four, I would argue, 4 to 5, quarterbacks on their board for 2025. Obviously, Cutter Boley visited last week, and we'll preview the other one today. So a lot going on in the recruiting world. So we're just going to make this a recruiting show, and then we'll do a mailbag at the end where you can ask about whatever you want. I just want to thank everybody for yesterday. Yesterday's show went great. We actually had 2 people give super chats in the second show that I'm going to apply to the first show because they said they wanted it to be towards the fundraiser we did. And yesterday, Ryan, I don't know. I mean, obviously Google's going to take their cut, but we raised almost $1,100 yesterday in super chats alone.
Wow.
So that was really exciting and really fun to do. And just, I knew this audience was going to step up, and they absolutely did. So that was very exciting. Once I find out how much the cut we get to keep from Google, which should be well over $700 if we get to keep the amount they say that we get to keep, we'll find out about that. But just really appreciate all that you all did. And we're going to do more of that here this year. I promise you that. Let's get into some recruiting stuff today, Ryan. Obviously, Notre Dame picked up commitment number 9 last night from Anthonie Knapp, an offensive lineman from Roswell, Georgia. Becomes the second offensive lineman to commit in the Notre Dame class of 2024, joining Peter Jones from Malvern Prep in Pennsylvania. Commitment number 6 on offense, and it reminds me a lot of the opposite of last year, when at this point in time everybody was panicking about the Notre Dame offense and how the class would end up. And for anyone that read my intel piece, I had a big intel piece on spring ball, on Irish Breakdown, on the Champions Lounge at Irish Breakdown, our premium message board, and there's some freshmen doing some things at Notre Dame, Ryan. But guys that a year ago, we weren't sure where Notre Dame stood with those guys. So when you're panicking about the defense, you know what I'm going to say, Ryan? 4 words, let it play out. But offensively, Notre Dame is rolling, Ryan. And we'd kind of hit a bit of a lull, right? I mean, Notre Dame had only picked up 1 commitment through the first 2.5 months of the 2023 calendar year. Yep. That was Leonard Moore, who they picked up back in, was it February, right? Late January, yep. February. Which is a really good pickup. Everybody knows I love Leonard Moore as a cornerback. And, okay, who's that next guy going to be? And honestly, Ryan, prior to the visit last week from Anthonie Knapp, it didn't look like Notre Dame was necessarily going to get a commitment over the next couple weeks. April was going to be the really big month. But Notre Dame brought Anthonie Knapp on campus. He measured in, got the check off from Matt Bayless. Joe Rudolph had been pushing Anthonie Knapp on the other coaches, but there was a lot of let's see him, Ryan, because and you and I felt the same way because you question just how big he is on film, and yep. So they wanted to see him, and he impressed everybody and got the stamp of approval from Matt Bayless, and so that's why he got the offer during the visit because he came on the visit with no offer. Yep. Because that's kind of what they do is like, yes, Joe Rudolph liked him, but he needed to make sure everybody else is on board with him. Jared Parker, Matt Bayless, Chad Bowden, Marcus Freeman, all those guys were also on board with him. And Anthonie checked all the boxes. And so Notre Dame offered him by the end of the visit. And what you and I knew is he basically committed. I don't know for sure if it was during the visit or shortly after the visit, but he committed pretty much on this at that time, Ryan. I think, what did I tell you? That the day after he left is when I told you that he had committed to Notre Dame.
Yep.
And so we just weren't sure when he was going to go public, but it's a good pickup for Notre Dame, Ryan, and it's good to kind of get some momentum back. Joe Rudolph gets an early pick. I mean, I think that's an interesting part of this too, Ryan. That is a bit of a storyline before we dive into Anthonie. Is, hey, what kind of lineman is Joe Rudolph going to want at Notre Dame? Is he going to want the big northern thumpers that he got at Wisconsin? Well, his first pickup from at Notre Dame is quite different than what he is normally getting at Wisconsin, which tells us a little something.
Yeah, it does, and it's this one's extremely interesting, Brian, because like you said, this one happened quickly, man. Like this was not a kid that was really on our radar a couple weeks ago. It was until we heard that he was visiting for the to visit last weekend that you're just kind of like, you don't exactly like. It was one of those decisions where you hear he's visiting. You watch his film, you're like, oh, he's a pretty impressive football player. But then you learn the backstory, right? That Joe Rudolph was big on him and saw him at a camp. And he was a Joe Rudolph guy. He was a guy that was being recruited by him while he was at Virginia Tech. So there was an affinity for this type of football player. So, yeah, it's definitely different than maybe what you're typical of seen as far as what Notre Dame targets on the offensive line and then what Joe Rudolph had specifically done at Wisconsin. But he's a very interesting football player, man. He brings a lot of intriguing qualities to the game that I think are pretty unique, because some people are going to look at the 6'4", 265, and they're going to question the size profile. Well, we've learned that his arm length was something that really popped this weekend as far as the measurements go. So he's a kid that brings a interesting amount of length, athleticism. I think he's got good foot quickness. He's physical. He's really physical. So he fits that profile of what Notre Dame is typically liked as far as the physicality attributes for the offensive line position. So for me, this is a very intriguing one and one that I'm interested to see now, especially when we get to the what's next portion of this podcast. What is next? Who are the top targets on the board? Who are the guys that Notre Dame's going to fill this class out with? Because I think there was an assumption that this kid is strictly an interior offensive lineman. And I'll be very honest. When I first watched this film, I thought he was an interior offensive lineman too. But when you learn more information about him, you see the arm length, and you just kind of hear a little bit of the background, you start to think, maybe this kid isn't just an interior offensive lineman. Right. Maybe he's got some position flexibility. Maybe he can play offensive tackle. So it's going to be intriguing to see how this offensive line class fills out in comparison to what Anthonie Knapp brings to the table.
Well, you and I talked when we first watched this film together, right? Because we kind of watched this film for the first time sort of together, just kind of on the phone. And the thing we said is he moves well. I mean, he moves well for a tackle. It was, does he have the behind to play tackle, which I think is the one question mark we still have. And then it was like, I don't know if he necessarily has great length. It looked like he had, I said in my article yesterday, above average arm length is what it looks like he has.
Yeah.
Just didn't look necessarily extremely long. Then we find out during his Notre Dame visit that he measures in at 34-inch arms, which is longer than – go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, which for comparison is about the same length as what Isaiah Foskey just had coming out of Notre Dame, which is just wild to think about.
Right. I mean, it's definitely longer than Zach Martin, who I think was in the 32s, right?
Yes.
And I think Liam Eichenberg was in the the high 32s, if I remember correctly, Ryan.
Yep.
Ronnie Stanley was very long. He had like 34 and a half, 35-inch arms. Mike McGlinchey had 34-inch arms. So those are tackle bodies. Robert Hainsey had 32 and a half or so, right? So if that's a legit thing, and that's that's what these teams do is they measure these kids, weigh these kids in and stuff when they come on visits. That's a impressive aspect. I mean, you're talking about Ronnie Stanley was like 35 and a half. Mike McGlinchey was 34. None of the other tackles had longer arms than that Notre Dame has had. So that says something. That's impressive. Now I expect Joe Alt to kind of be long like that, and Blake Fisher will be long like that. So, kind of made me do a double take, Ryan, and go back on the film and say, hey, look, okay, can this kid play tackle or not? And so when I had that conversation today with a couple of sources about that length, that was legit, because I think the kid had said it or something like that, but it just was like, okay, I'm not sure if that's kind of where he is. But when you see it, you're like, okay, if that's legit, then the athleticism is there. Now it's about can he get the behind? But that's true at all the positions, right? And what I mean by that is, he's 265, and he doesn't necessarily have a huge frame. He's more Robert Hainsey than he is Joe Alt. You know what I
Sure.
mean? When Joe Walt was 250, 260, you can say, yeah, but he's still going to be really big. You just wonder, can he maintain the athleticism? And that's what we're going to find out about Anthonie Knapp. The thing that I like, Ryan, too, is it's a combination of you need better athletes at Notre Dame than you had at Wisconsin. That when you watch the film, that was a glaring issue constantly for Wisconsin, especially Joe Rudolph's last couple of offensive lines. They were kind of heavy-footed kids in that when they would play teams like Notre Dame. That's what gave why Notre Dame gave them a ton of problems in 2021, Ryan, is they just couldn't handle Jason Adamiola had some plays in that game. Jacob Lacey had a couple big stops in that game. Riley Mills had a really big game against them. And who are those guys? It's Notre Dame's more athletic off-the-ball tackles. They gave Wisconsin fits, which is why Wisconsin didn't even sniff 100 yards rushing in that game. Well, now you say, okay, but you also don't want to lose the toughness and the demeanor that they had at Wisconsin that Harry Hiestand brought with last year's class. And the comment that I made, Ryan, to you that I was glad we saw it the same way is this kid looks a lot like last year's Harry Hiestand offensive line class from a personality, demeanor, toughness, attitude. There's a couple pancakes where he kind of leans on the guy in a way that's kind of like, I'm trying to humiliate you, that you're like, okay, that's what you want. You hope that Joe Rudolph is going to continue to bring. And at least with this young man, he certainly did.
Yeah, he's a mean guy, man. I mean, that was one of the first things we talked about on the podcast when I think we were previewing his visit was this kid's going to get you on the ground. He's going to let you know about it, man. And I love that from offensive line personally, as long as you're not taking it a little too far, and getting a flag called and I love that demeanor. And I think that is historically, or at least when Notre Dame's been at its best, historically, you recruit those type of offensive linemen, right? The guys that are going to put you in the dirt and they're going to let you know about it a little bit. So he brings that profile, man, that is really interesting in that regard. And it is going to stay consistent with the Sullivan Abshers of the world, the Sam Pendletons, the Joe Ottings, the Charles Jagasaws, the Christopher Terricks, like that brand of offensive linemen that want to impose their will on a player. That is important, I believe, in continuing to build that. But like you said, Brian, this isn't just all power and no finesse, right? Like you see him in pass protection, you're like, he knows how to snatch trap. He has pretty good feet in pass protection. The only question I had, to your point, was, is this kid long enough to play offensive tackle? Well, if he is that long, then the narrative starts changing a little bit. Right. Because, yes, he's really good in pass protection on the high school level, but it's the same thing when you're evaluating for the NFL draft comparative to college football. It's like, yes, he can do that at that level in high school. Does he have the physical traits and profile to project forward doing that type of stuff? And if he has 34-inch arms and he maintains his foot quickness and his technique, I think he has a shot to do it. It's just about physical development for a guy like Anthonie Knapp.
And that's going to be a big key. We'll get into kind of his game a little bit more here, Ryan. There's aspects of his game obviously need to be improved, which is, true of, I don't know, every other single college, high school junior at this point in time. And we'll dive into those and look at those different things. I'll tell you what, Ryan, this was like you said, this is an interesting development. And I like when you see when a new coach come in and immediately say, hey, I know what I want. Right. I think conviction is an important thing when it comes to recruiting. And Joe Rudolph had success recruiting me. He signed, Nolan Rucci he got from Pennsylvania, beat Notre Dame and Penn State for him. He was a top 100 kid, got Logan Brown out of Illinois. He's a top ranked kid. You wondered, how would he do at Notre Dame? And he came in and hit the ground running. And, Chancey Stuckey did something very similar when he got hired. If you remember was it January when Coach Stuckey got hired, February when Coach Stuckey got hired, he immediately was like, I want this guy, Braylon James, Jaden Greathouse, two kids that I've been recruiting. I want them at Notre Dame. Yeah. And there was conviction there. And then he went and got it done with those two guys. And so to me, I want a coach that has some conviction in what he wants. You also make sure you want a guy that brings in what you like. But, I like this kid. I think that if you just look at him by himself, we'll see what else he does. Obviously, the entire story has yet to be written. Sure. I want to see who he does or doesn't like moving forward. But this is a kid that you look at and say, this is a good football player. And I get it. Doesn't have a Georgia offer, Alabama offer. But with all due respect, there's nobody, if Notre Dame offensive line play if Joe Rudolph wants to say, hey, I like this kid, then I'm at this early in the scrum willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for now.
Sure.
And that's kind of where I'm at with Anthonie Knapp.
Yeah.
Ryan, when we talk about the class impact, I think Notre Dame is looking for 4 offensive linemen in this class. Ideally, I think they can get away with 3, but the Caleb Johnson not being on the roster anymore has opened up an extra spot. So you now have 4. You're at the place now where you have to, if you're a staff, you have to now decide pretty quickly just how serious you are about giving Anthonie Knapp a look at tackle.
Yes.
Because how you view him is going to alter who else you bring into the class. If you view him as a potential tackle, you still have a lot of, the board is still wide open. If you view him more as an interior player, I think it narrows the board a little bit more. And, Liam Andrews are off the board if that's true. You look at the Caleb Brewer potentially could be off the board if you're not sure he's a pure tackle. So if Notre Dame views him as a tackle, then that keeps things pretty open. So that's what's going to be interesting to find out is what the staff, because Joe Rudolph may think one thing, but everybody's got to be on board. Jared Parker's got to be on board with that. Chad Bode's got to be on board with that. Marcus Freeman's got to be on board with that. Everybody's got to be on board that, hey, this guy's a tackle. We think this guy could be a tackle.
Right.
And then you got to build your class around it. So we're going to see how it impacts the rest of the class. And that's still too early to really know that for sure. We've heard a couple different things, but we're gonna see how kind of it plays out. And then I'm curious how this weekend plays out. You've got some big time not some big time, but some very important offensive linemen coming on campus this weekend, which we'll talk about later. So I think the class impact is very interesting. It does also moves Notre Dame back up to number 3 overall in the rankings. They were already number 3 in rivals. They're now number 3 again in 247. They're behind Georgia and LSU in both. Interestingly enough, Notre Dame and Georgia, or Notre Dame and LSU, or LSU has 2 more commits than Notre Dame. On both rankings, Notre Dame has a higher per player average than LSU. LSU's only ranked ahead of Notre Dame right now because they have 2 more commits. And on rivals, Notre Dame is closer to number 2 than they are to number 4 in that ranking as well when it looks at rivals. So very, very good start to the year so far for Notre Dame and a very good offensive class that this staff is putting together. And this is really, Ryan, the first offensive commit that the new look staff has landed, right? Yeah. So since Tommy Rees left. So that matters too, because that's something that we're still having to learn is how does this staff as a whole with new leadership going to look? We know what Tommy Rees could do with these assistant coaches. Now we need to find out what Jared Parker can do with these offensive coaches.
Agree. It's a very interesting. It's almost like a little bit of, just kind of I won't call it a test period, but like it's a sample, right? Like a little bit of an understanding of what that is going to look like for Joe Rudolph, for this coaching staff moving forward. And I think that you said it perfectly, Brian, depending on how they view a guy like an Anthonie Knapp, because we also know that there's a possibility that Peter Jones might begin his career at offensive tackle. Like that's a thing that is also kind of on the table, right? Like it's not a foregone conclusion that he's a guard. I think that he's a better guard potentially on the next level. I think you do as well. But the fact of the matter is it matters most what Notre Dame thinks of these players, right? So if a Peter Jones starts an offensive tackle, Anthonie Knapp starts an offensive tackle, what does that board look like? You kind of alluded that. But I would also say this. I don't know if it would necessarily change my opinion on what the next step is, because I think baseline speaking, Peter Jones and Anthonie Knapp could both play inside. Like there's no doubt about that. So even if they start the career at offensive tackle, you could say, but potentially they could also be interior offensive linemen. So that could also fill a couple different holes with that versatility they bring. So I feel like I would still kind of take my swing at a couple offensive tackles on the board. But to your point, it just matters about what the numbers obviously look at. But I think that this is it's a good gift for Notre Dame. It's a player that I liked immediately when I saw the film. I know that there's some things that we have questions about as far as the size and things that we'll get to when we watch the film. But I think that this is a very intriguing football player that was landed quickly by Notre Dame. And I look forward to seeing how the rest of the class fills out, because I think that it will be it's like a case study. Like I would call it a case study of what a Joe Rudolph offensive line class will look like. Because his opinion on Peter Jones might even be unique to what Notre Dame thinks, right? Like he might come in and be like, yeah, you guys thought he was a tackle, but like I think he's a guard, right? So like we might need to get a couple more offensive tackles. So this is a little insight for me.
Or vice versa. hey,
Yes,
you guys
100%.
thought he was a guard, but I think the kid's a really good right tackle. You know, I mean, look at
Exactly.
Wisconsin. Peter Jones could play tackle.
Yeah, well, he's
But
like
this isn't Wisconsin, right? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
he's like Logan Bruss that played at Wisconsin. Started off as a right tackle, but then ended up being a really good guard and is playing in the NFL as a guard. Like that might be his trajectory. You never know, right? But I just think that it's some good insight into what Joe Rudolph likes in an offensive line, and then what he's trying to forecast for what his first offensive line group is going to look like.
For me, Ryan, here's where I'm at when it comes to how to evaluate Joe Rudolph as a recruiter. Number one is we have to evaluate him based on how we evaluate players, right? I mean, that's just fair. We always have to do that. Hey, I don't like this. This guy can't play, and so I don't like this pickup, that kind of thing, if that were to be the case. I think the other part of it, too, is we need to be willing to say, hey, look, this guy is new here. We need to see how he's going to pan out. You know, there were some guys that Harry Heastan landed early in his career that people were like, I don't know about that guy. When Mike McGlinchey committed to Notre Dame, he was a 3-star commit. Sure. And everybody was obsessed with Steve Elmer, and Hunter Bivin was a top 100 guy, and John Montelis was a top 100 guy. Well, Steve Elmer ended up being a pretty good player. Hunter Bivin was a solid backup type of guy. John Montelis never did a thing at Notre Dame. And who was the stud from that class? It was Mike McGlinchey, right? I mean, we've been here before. So let's see how it continues to progress and how this class gets put together. Because that ultimately, and here was an issue that I had with some folks that were kind of debating this one yesterday, is you can look at a quarterback with no other context to what you're recruiting him in that class because he's the only quarterback you're going to take. When you talk about an offensive lineman, it's hard to evaluate it without the context of what else do you land. And that's why I'm willing to say, look, I'm not saying I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt per se. It's like, let's give him time to show himself and to see how the rest of this class shapes out. That's kind of where I'm at. And what I hope that more Notre Dame fans will do when it comes to this commitment and then the other, when it comes to Anthonie Knapp and then Joe Rudolph as a whole is, hey, let's see what this class looks like as a whole before we start panicking too much about whatever this kid's recruiting ranking is. The other thing I would say is there are things that on film that I could understand some of you having an issue with. The thing I will ask is to never, ever come at me about what a kid's ranking is as an offensive lineman, because there is no position out there that people get wrong more and miss on more from an evaluation standpoint at the national level, in my opinion, than offensive line. And that's true for colleges as well, because it's just such a different deal. There's no other position in my opinion, outside of the lines on both sides of the ball, where you see a greater weight difference in prospects. And I would say no position is greater when you consider offensive line as just as a whole. Defensive line tackles, you won't see a 215-pound defensive tackle. You may see a 260 guy or 250 guy. But you're going to see Joe Alt. When Notre Dame first started recruiting Joe Alt, he was about 20 pounds lighter than Anthonie Knapp and about 4 inches taller, 3 inches taller, right? So let's see how this one plays out. And I remember we had this debate too when Notre Dame landed Joe Alt. I liked Joe Alt a lot. I was, hey, give me a Joe Alt type of player every year. Yeah. Anthonie Knapp is that. Joe Otting was that guy last year. Ashton Craig was that guy the year before. Anthonie Knapp is that guy in the 2024 class. Yeah, maybe he's got to develop. He's got to get bigger and stronger. And you never know how a guy is going to move when you got to put 40, 50 pounds on him. And especially with Knapp, who was talked about how he was like 210 pounds when he started high school. So he's put on 50 pounds already. Will he maintain his athleticism when he gets up to 290 plus? We're going to find that out. But you give me a kid like that every year. That's why when we talk about what's next, it's important that these next two pickups be not so much positionally, but as players, more guys that you look and say, okay, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right?
And offensive line recruiting is such an in-depth process too, Brian, because it's not just this position more than most is a Matt Bayless thing, right? Where you're like, Coach Bayless, like this kid's 265 pounds, brother. Like, what do you think he could be, right? Like projecting forward, how much weight can he carry on his frame? What can he look like? This is a really in-depth process because it's not just about Joe Rudolph, right? It's about what Matt Bayless thinks. It's about what Coach Freeman thinks. There's a multitude of opinions and perspectives that you need in this type of recruitment, which is, again, I've learned there's a couple people in this program that I trust dearly, right, Brian? Like we talked about the trust for Harry Heastan in the past, right? I trust Matt Bayless a lot,
I
right?
do,
So like
especially when it comes to stuff like this.
yes.
Absolutely.
So if he thinks that Anthonie Knapp can carry that weight appropriately, I'm here, brother.
Yep.
I'm here. I'm going to listen because
Yep.
you know a lot more about physical body development than I certainly do.
And
So
he's seen
I'm
him
here for
up
it.
close and personal, which we have
Yes.
not.
Yep.
And that's a big part of it too, Ryan. That's a big part of it as well.
No doubt.
So let's, Ryan, that's kind of a what's, sort of a class impact look. We'll get into the what's next after we watch some film, but, I've been dying to do this. I just really want to watch some film, Ryan. It's one of those days. I just want to watch some film, man.
Yep.
So let's bring up some film of Anthonie Knapp. Anthonie is the left tackle in this film. He's number 55. So let's check him out. So I think what you're going to see early on in the film, Ryan, is this is a kid that plays with some physicality.
Yes.
And so you're going to see him here as you see. Oh, I love it when Huddle does that. I like this. Keeps a nice base. Ryan comes off, delivers contact, uses his hands effectively, doesn't just body block either one of these guys. Gets his hands out, gets a nice pin on that guy, takes him in there, and then this is where you see okay, I'm going to mount you real quick. That's like, okay, that's just mean. And I like it. I dig it. Nice punch there. Really heavy hands, Ryan. That's something I see from film.
And that tells you if he's able to gain the weight, like combined with that heavy hands, it's going to be a very powerful dude. I love Brian. He always wants to work, man. Like no matter if he's in the run game or in the pass game, he's always trying to find work. And he's one of those dudes that literally plays to the echo of the whistle. Like he's one of those guys where you watch the game film sometimes where you see the ref go over to him after play, like, hey dude, like it's over. You can get off of him now. He's like one of those guys,
Exactly.
So.
Well, and that's part of the reason that we have faith in Emil Wagner not needing to be 300 plus pounds. I've said, look, if Emil can get to 290, I'm going to feel good about that as long as he moves like he does now, because Emil has very strong, powerful hands. I wouldn't say that Anthonie Knapp has the same power that Emil had at the same age, but he's in the ballpark. Yeah. This is a particular play, Ryan, that shows me an area, a thing I like. His late in the play foot quickness, I like. The power, I like. But one thing you will see that's a constant throughout the film is he has a bad habit of narrowing his base. Yeah. And narrowing your base does two things. Number one, it forces you to be more vertical as a player, which you never want to be as an offensive lineman. And the other thing, too, is the more you narrow your base, the more you lose power. This is an example of him keeping a great base throughout the play, and he stones the guy, puts him on the ground. Now, I've heard somebody said on the board yesterday, like, hey, he's going against a lot of small guys. And I'm like, I know what level of football this is. He's playing against guys that are going to be playing at D1 and 1AA football in college. Yes. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. But what you also see, Ryan, like this is one here. He keeps his pads low, comes off, fires off the ball, and drives a kid into the end zone and puts him onto the ground, right? Play still going on. And that's what he does. But right here, just in his stance, he's getting off to a bad start, right? Like you see a little bit of stiffness, like in his particular stance. Keeps a good base, and he stones him. But we're going to get to some plays here in a little bit, Ryan, where it's like, yeah, you can't narrow up like that, man. Yeah. And here's an example of one. This is a great example of one. And this is why I say highlights can be very telling, because sometimes a kid thinks it's a highlight. Why does he think it's a highlight? Because of that.
Put him in the ground.
But what I'm saying is terrible get off on the line, off the ball, right? Doesn't move his feet at all, narrows his base. He's basically walking the guy back. This is simply him just being way better than the dude he's going against. Yes. But it's an example too, Ryan, that you see of a very narrow base. If you're going to, I'll put it to you like this. If he's going on this particular play against Justin Scott, or Elijah Rushing, or some of the other top linemen, he's getting driven into the backfield if he comes up like this, Ryan. And that's an area, that's a fundamental thing that has to be improved. Because here's the thing we discuss, Ryan. If a guy plays tall, you say, okay, is he just like Andrew Sprague, right? Yep. We've said I think he plays tall because I think he's physically tight. I just think his hips are really tight, so he can't really bend at the knees. This kid shows you several clips of him bending at the knees, and then somewhere he doesn't. Like that's one of those ones you're like, hey, bro, once you get to that sideline, let him go. But you love the demeanor, right? And you've said this before. I agree with you. I'd rather have a guy like this than a guy who you have to kick in the butt to get going.
100.
I'd
percent
rather have a guy have to hey man, let's rein that in a little bit.
I learned that from a scout before, Brian. That was like, I always want a guy that is a little too much than a guy that isn't enough, because you're never going to get the enough out of the guy that isn't enough, right? Like, you're never going to be able to reel out that physicality, that aggressiveness. But the guy like this, like, yeah, he might finish through the whistle a little bit too hard sometimes, but like, I can reel that back, man. Like, all right, dude, like, just, you drove him into the grounds, get up, back to the huddle.
Right.
Let's ease it back a little bit. But that's something that is easily fixable to bring him in.
Here's another example, Ryan, where he keeps a good base and he's able to move really quickly out of his stance. He has a good first step in pass game when his base is good. He really does. He uses his hands well. You know the thing I notice about him? He rarely body blocks.
No.
He is always using his hand. His hand placement's inconsistent, but this kid knows how to use his hands. For a junior, he's pretty advanced in that regard. He really is.
He really has good independent hands too, and independent hands for people that aren't like big offensive line people. The lower body and the upper body have to be independent at times, because you're always constantly hand fighting, right? Like, this guy's defensive linemen are trying to get your hands off of you. So I think that first pass rep, where he just kind of drove the guy across the formation and into the ground, you really saw his pistons were firing, even though his lower body was not connected to him, because he understands how to use his hands independently. He understands how important it is that when his base is staying firm and he's able to, to mirror in pass protection, that he still needs to have that hand usage. He still needs to fight to get the inside leverage on dudes. And I think that's very interesting, of like, if he is as long as we are led to believe, he's got the hands to stay in pass protection. Right. He's got the kick to stay in pass protection.
Foot quickness, change of direction. Yeah,
it's
all
there,
that
man.
tracks. It's just, can he carry the weight to play on the edge? And it used to be in the past, Ryan, where the weight needed to be inside, but it's not that way anymore. You're going to put some of your more undersized guys inside, because they're always going to have help.
Yes.
I mean, guards almost never solo block in the run game. Almost never. Tackles have to play in space a lot more. You see, he's a really easy mover right here, like really fluid, really good change of direction. And again, he's also a guy that does a pretty good job of staying on guys, to the point where sometimes, like, is he holding there? Like, he stays pretty glued into guys. This is a play where, you see his base get a little bit narrow. You'll see too much of that. And there's I'll try to find it and put it back on the board, but there's a game film on YouTube of him. I'll have to try and find it again. But when he keeps his pads low, Ryan, you're like, okay, this is right here. This is a good example. Good base. Look at that. Easy change of direction. Handles this twist pretty well. Linebacker flashes. He moves, does a great job of moving his feet through contact. Because if he stops his feet, the hole's closed up.
Yep.
But he steps to the guy and then steps through the contact and drives the guy back. And next thing you know, there's a hole there. There's not.
This is the second or third rep too, where he's working on a little bit of a combo block with his guard, and then he passes off to work to the second level. So like, you even see that's like advanced stuff, man. Like, you need the feel for that type of stuff. And I think he has a pretty good feel for the game for the most part.
Do you see a hole there, Ryan? Because I don't.
No, I don't see a hole.
That's where he initially has contact with the defender.
Yes.
And this is the point. Now there's a hole, right? So initially, no hole. Now there's a pretty big freaking hole.
Yep.
And that's what you see. It's because why? Yeah, he's strong and all that, but I don't care how strong you are, if you don't move your feet, you can't move the hole. You can't open up the hole.
This, in my opinion, is an ideal inside zone blocker for me, right? Like, he has the ability to work in combos and get off to the second level. But there was even a play a few plays ago, Brian, where you saw him cut off a dude from the backside on zone and be able to drive him into the turf. So like, he's very easy mover, to your point, right? And I think that he really is comfortable creating leverage through his foot speed.
It's another play, Ryan, where I think he narrows his base too much.
Yep.
It works because he's just so much better than the people he's going against. But this is another one where I want to see him sink and really drive he's using his upper body to block here. Which is fine, but you're just not seeing that same power because he's got too narrow of a base.
Yep.
It's a technical thing, and that's the thing, right? That can be fixed. That can be corrected.
Yep. And we didn't even talk about, man, it's always nice to get into Georgia occasionally,
yes,
right?
Like,
that's always a good thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a kid that Penn State wanted. So obviously he visited Penn State, I think the week before he visited Notre Dame. North Carolina was pushing for him. It's a nice ball. Well, nice little tiny itty bitty tight. Look, that kid's about 3.5 feet tall at quarterback. Look at that kid. It's a nice ball.
That is a nice ball.
You know, that kid's tiny.
Yeah.
They do a lot of movement stuff in this line too, Ryan, and he's going to have a lot of experience kind of working there. You can see here bad technique right here, right? Like you're trying to reach block this, and your first step just kind of picks up and puts down, and then you're trying to gather. You need a lot more of a power reach step here, but he's so athletic he can overcome and still get out there.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, on this one too, like he hurts himself by taking a little bit of a shallow angle, right? Like let's open almost like a bucket step, or at least almost like a pull step, and you'll be able to kind of get his upfield shoulder a little bit easier. Right. But I mean, again, he shows his explosion on power, on contact though. Like he is a powerful dude. Right. There's no doubt about that.
You look at it and say against an Elijah Rushing, a Justin Scott, Owen Wafel, this play doesn't work. Right. Yes. Because the fundamentals aren't there, but the potential's there. Like, so there's two types of steps you want to take here, Ryan, depending on how you're reading this particular play. One is you want to take a really physical power step and drive through the guy, through his inside shoulder to the outside. That's going to accomplish one of two things. One is if the guy takes a hard upfield angle, then you just drive him outside and the running back cuts right inside of your butt. Right.
Yep.
The other one is if you're really trying to stretch it, which here it looks like they're stretching it. To me, this looks more like a stretch. Then you need to take that open step and then really work hard for speed and power through the outside. He doesn't do that. And so against a better player, this doesn't work. But you also see why he's an effective player, because he does have that power and athleticism to overcome it. This is a punch right here. This is violent.
It's a poor kid right there, man.
Yeah.
But I love it, Brian. He continues to get work, man. Like he finishes through the end zone consistently because he wants to find work, man. This is not one of those guys that's a first contact blocker. Like he is a relentless dude in the run game.
Here's another play of him narrowing his base. So, you see that real narrow base, but you see the violent hands, right? And that's the thing. I want to see Ryan, here's where I'm at. You can chime in if you have a difference of opinion on this. Sure. Not that you can't chime in. I'm not like I need to give you permission to chime in, but you get the point I'm going with here.
Yes.
Give me the toolsy kid that doesn't know what the heck he's doing any day of the week. That's the kind of kid I love, then maybe that's just because the level I came from. I had to find guys like that, because if a guy was a ready-made product, he's probably getting a scholarship somewhere, Sure. But that's the fun of coaching, is to take this ball of clay that's got all the tools you want and say, now I'm going to turn you into a football player, and I'm going to teach you how to play the game. And that's kind of where I'm at.
I mean, Brian, you've heard me talk about it, right? Like what offensive line coach wouldn't want to work with him, right? Like you need to find guys that you're excited about working with, right? Yeah. And that's the toolsy guys.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Ryan, because this is a great example you were talking about earlier. For whatever reason, like everybody kind of leaves him. There's like nobody for him to block. So what does he do? He just hunts. So looks like he's actually playing. Where's the center? Okay, so he's playing left tackle again here. Everybody flies out with the jet sweep. The inside guy slants inside. It's like, okay, what am I doing? Look at him. He's hunting. He's hunting for work. I mean, right now, it's like, okay, this is going to be a touchdown because there's literally nobody here. Doesn't really have to do anything. This is terrible defense. But what he does is he hunts. He hunts for work, and you want linemen like that. Like if I don't have good contact on this play, I'm going to feel like I just feel like I just wasted a play. It's a really nice base right here. Really nice base right here, Ryan.
He's one of those guys, man, that he seems like he takes it personal that a defender even steps on the field with him, right? Like that's kind of the vibe I get. But I mean, like you said, here he is, kind of a little bit of a 45, but he is able to maintain leverage very quickly. And then, I mean, that lower body strength is there, man. Like if he's able to gain proper weight, which again, I have confidence that he will, because he's been signed off on by a guy that knows it very well. And this power profile is going to be very good when he fills out.
For the record, this kid right here that he's going against, for those who say he didn't go against, Division I, this kid right here that he pancakes is signed with Georgia Tech in the 23 class.
Yeah.
So it's a Power 5 defensive end that he manhandles.
He puts him down, man. I mean, again, it's 6A football in the state of Georgia, right? There's 7 classifications. He's in 6A. I mean, they're playing against they're playing against teams that are playing against Mill Creek, like Caleb Downs' team, right? Like that's who they're playing in Georgia. So he plays plenty of good players. Oof.
Here he loses early. I love this play. This is one of my favorite plays from him because he loses early, gets knocked back. You don't ever want to see a lineman have to get knocked off his feet like that, right, Ryan? Like he gets kind of caught mid-step, but he as soon as he hits the ground, you can see the pellets flying up, right? And he anchors, but he doesn't anchor and stop his feet. He anchors and goes right back on the attack. This is a play I like a lot, Ryan, because initially he's about to catch an L. But he battles through it and fights through it. You know, Ben still locks his knees a little bit more than I want to there, but that's a really nice recovery rep right there, Ryan. It ends up knocking the guy on his butt. That was one of my favorite reps on the clip because you saw him. How's he going to handle adversity? How's he going to handle when he gets knocked back a little bit early? How's he going to deal with that? Well, you just saw it. You just saw it.
And on these two,
against right there. Good.
Yeah, Lord. It is.
How long that kid is.
He's very long. And on these two reps, the defensive end initially gets inside on his chest, but you see that he's able to reset his hands and establish inside leverage. Like you see right here, this kid gets in his chest quickly, but he's able to keep hand fighting, get back the leverage, and then he finishes the kid on the ground again, like always.
Yep. That's a good rep right there. Let's see.
Yeah.
A little bit narrows his base a little bit, right? I mean, this is another example of him narrow his base a little bit. You see a lot. You see too much of that, Ryan. But again, I'm going to repeat this. That is a correctable thing that is going to make you not like a guy when you first watch his film, which is kind of how I was. Like, I don't know. But then you watch it more and more, and you're like, yeah, that's correctable. That's fixable.
He really
is something else too.
He
anchors a little late sometimes. This is another example. He's going against a smaller guy, so it doesn't hurt him. But a bigger rusher, I'll put it like this: if Jalen Snead's blitzing right here, he's knocking this kid on his butt. You know, if Nolan Ziegler's, but it's a nice recovery. It's a nice recovery, and he's able to get hands on. His hands are a little wide here, right? So you got to watch, maybe get called for a hold here.
I mean, he's got
toughness.
Yeah, man, I think core strength and hand strength are the things that pop out with this kid. Like the ability to anchor, you need to have a strong core and ability to just dig your heels in the ground and be able to sit down on power. And I think he does. I mean, he did that on that's against a good size kid that he able to do that and finish him on the ground.
So, Ryan, that is our film breakdown of Anthonie Knapp. I think you see the things that we like. You see the things that are still areas where he needs to work. Right, as all junior offensive linemen do. But I think what you see from him, what you see from Peter Jones, what you saw from every single kid that Notre Dame signed last year, even a guy like Christopher Tarrick, Ryan, who you and I weren't really high on, he's a physical kid. And that's something was lacking from some previous groups, like Caleb Johnson, for example. Caleb Johnson was a good football player. I liked his high school film, and from everything I've been told by sources, he was a pretty good pass blocker at Notre Dame. He just wasn't a really powerful kid, and that hurt him along with the fact that he couldn't gain weight. But he's a good football player. It's just a different style. You put Caleb Johnson in Mississippi State's offense under Mike Leach, the late great Mike Leach. He's a great offensive tackle. Because they don't have to run block, but at Notre Dame, you need guys that have that power profile. You can't win without guys that have that, or at the very least, guys that are fighters. For example, Robert Hainsey did not have a great power profile coming out, right? Even in Notre Dame, I would not call him a powerful player, but he was strong. He was a hard worker, but he was a fighter. And he was a technician. And you give me a guy that's got a little bit of something in his behind and a guy that's going to fight and be a technician and is smart with good athleticism. And Robert had good athleticism. Not great, but good athleticism. That's why Robert Haynes is in the NFL. And a guy like and is a starter, and people are very high on down in Tampa Bay when I talk to different sources down there, very high on his future, especially with him moving to guard, which is the expectation for next year when it was Jensen's the center, right? Mm-hmm. Jensen's coming back from injury. They think moving him to guard, he's going to be even better because he's more comfortable playing with, without the ball in his hands as the center. Why is he a guy that people are fired up about down there? But Alex Leatherwood, who has way better physical tools than Robert Hainsey, is considered a bust, right? It's the other parts of it, the fighter, the technician, the guy that brings it every day. Yep. And that's what you think you see from Anthonie Knapp, and that's kind of that's what we come to like. And he's not one of those guys, Ryan, when I watch Gary Lambert play, I'm like 5, 6, 7 snaps, and I'm like, yep, okay, I like this guy.
Yeah.
Anthonie Knapp's not that guy. He is a film guy, meaning I got to watch a lot of film on this guy. He's
Slow
a guy
burn.
that grows on you. Would you say
Yeah.
slow burn? I think
Slow
that's
burn.
that's a good one. That's a really good way of putting it. It's a
Yep.
very good way of putting it.
That's what I always talk about when I do like evaluations for the NFL. It's like some guys, like you just said, I could watch 6 plays. I'm like, yup, I know 100% what that guy is. And then there's other guys where it takes until the second game where you're like, okay, I get this now. Like I get this. This is a slow burn prospect for me. Doesn't mean they're not good. It just means that you need to appreciate other facets of his game other than just like the easy length, and just outrageous foot quickness type of stuff, right? Like there's other aspects of their game that are intangibly driven that you need to be able to appreciate more with the more film you watch.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So that's Anthonie Knapp. Ryan, let's talk a little bit about what's next as we wrap up this portion and we dive into the recruiting weekend. Right now, it really comes down to how does Notre Dame view him? Do they view him as a guy that they want to give a legitimate shot at tackle? If so, everybody was on the board before, still on the board.
Yep.
If they view him as more of ultimately an interior player, then you have to question, okay, how are they going to view Caleb Brewer moving forward?
Right.
Because I don't know if I don't know where they project Caleb Brewer. Do they view him as a pure tackle, pure inside? So he becomes a bit of I'm not sure where they stand with him. You look at a guy like Liam Andrews. If you view this kid as an interior player, it's going to be hard to justify bringing in Liam Andrews unless you want to be able to get this class to 5 offensive linemen. Which I don't know if that's necessarily where you're going to want to get to. And so I think those are things that are going to impact this. Guys on the board, we're going to have a couple that we're going to talk about today. Kevin Haywood, obviously Caleb Brewer, Gary Lambert. Those are guys that are on the board right now. Ryan, Liam Andrews is a guy that I talked about, assuming he was a guy that we've talked about with Notre Dame and a guy that they were looking at and still on the board. I think they like him depending on where you are with this kid. So the board's not Grant Bricks. You've talked about Styles Prescott is another guy that's on the board. And then Andrew, I think it's Sprague. I think is what I've heard people say.
I think it's Sprague too, yeah.
So I think those are aspects of that. The board's still kind of good sized. Notre Dame's never going to have a huge offensive line board, but there's a decent number of guys on the board. You've now got to focus for sure on at least one more pure, no doubt about it, tackle.
Yes.
And I would even argue 2. Because here's the thing, a pure, no doubt about it, tackle, unless he's 6'8", and even then, maybe, they can play guard. Like you can have 5 tackles on your starting offensive line. You can't have 5 guards.
Yep.
That's just the reality of it. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. So you really need to bring in some guys, the Styles Prescotts, obviously Gary Lambert, but the Styles Prescotts, the Kevin Haywoods, who we'll talk about him another time as a player. You're definitely going to need to bring in at least one more of those type of guys. I personally would be, and here's the other way to look at it too, Ryan, is if let's say you get Gary Lambert and Caleb Brewer.
Yep.
Well, with Peter Jones, Anthonie Knapp, and Caleb Brewer, I'm not sure which one of those guys is going to be a tackle. But I feel like with all 3 of them able to play tackle, you feel comfortable that one of them is going to be able to stick on the edge, and now you kind of have your 2 tackles.
And right? you got 3 shots for 1, right? I mean, like that's
right.
Yeah, 100%. Agree.
Right.
Agree.
That's kind of how I look at that, Ryan. I'm not sure how Notre Dame is going to look at it, and that's the unknown at this point in time, is how they're going to look at it. So, and I think this weekend's going to play a big part of that.
Agree.
Anthonie Knapp measured in. Well, what's Caleb Brewer measuring at? Is he 6'3.5" with 32-inch arms, or is he legit 6'5" with 33+ inch arms? That's going to tell a lot. When you get into this whole type of thing. And some of y'all may be like, wait a minute, hold on, 32 versus 33, what's the difference? Well, 32 versus 33.5 could be the difference between whether or not I think a guy can play there or not.
Yep.
And that's the reality of it. So we're going to find out a lot, but it's a good pickup, Ryan. Is this a gap closing offensive line pickup? No, because there is no gap to close when it comes to offensive line. But this is a kid that brings the demeanor that you look for, that brings some athleticism to the table, that brings power to the table, and brings versatility to the table. And all those boxes are good. You want to check all those when you're talking about bringing in offensive linemen. You need guys like this in your class.
Yes. Yep. And he's a different profile, obviously, to Peter Jones, but Peter Jones brings a lot of those same qualities, just in a little bit of a bigger package, right? He's more in the 6'5.5", 6'6", 300-pound type of package, right? So I think Notre Dame's off to a really good start on the offensive tackle board, Brian. I agree with you, offensive line board, I should say. I agree with you, though. And I think that for me personally, and this is not intel, this is just me personally, I would still target those pure offensive tackle types. Because to your point, there's no guarantee that either one of the tackles in this class now for Notre Dame are going to stick a tackle. But the more shots you have at it, the better chance you have that one of them will, and then the other guys are just transitioning inside the guard or into center. I mean, either way, I think you're hitting all the areas you need to hit. But I think Anthonie Knapp brings some potential versatility as far as alignment perspective. He could be a guard, could be a tackle, could be a center. There's a lot of things that I think Anthonie Knapp can potentially bring to your football team.
Absolutely agree with that, Ryan.
Yeah.
So I was publishing stories, so I was still clicking. That's why I didn't click over just yet. But
Gotcha.
I appreciate the help there, my friend. That's going to do it on this one, Ryan. We're going to talk about recruiting next. But before we jump on to this weekend's recruiting visit, I want to ask a small favor of y'all. It takes about 5 seconds. Grab your mouse or your phone. Go down. There's this thumbs up button right below this photo or right below the screen that you're looking at. Not a thumbs up button. Hit that for me, please. I would greatly appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. And if you're not a member of the boards, you're going to want to read the intel that we put up today. I'm telling you, you're going to want to read the intel that we put up today. And so I've been able to talk to a lot of sources, been doing some digging about where things stand with the Notre Dame football team on offense, and liked what I heard. I'm going to tell you that right now. Not everything. There's a couple things like, I wish I got better news there, but there's a lot of really good stuff at quarterback and receiver especially. And I'm not there. I'm about halfway done gathering intel on the defense. Got a couple more sources I want to try to see if I get something out of here over the next couple days, but I've got a defensive one coming here over the next day or two. So I just want to make sure I hear back from a few people first before I dive into that. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting that defensive version of it. But today was about the Notre Dame offense. So definitely check that out on the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's a big recruiting weekend coming up this, Ryan, which we talked about. Notre Dame's going to have they had some kids on campus yesterday for yesterday's practice. Trey McNutt, I believe, a 2025 safety who got a pot of gold offer he's from Ohio, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Trey McNutt. He was on campus yesterday. He had a couple 24 kids on campus yesterday. Yep. And then tomorrow and through Saturday and Sunday, there's going to be a lot more kids on campus, Ryan. I mean, there's some 26 kids coming on campus this week, but we're going to focus on the 24 and 25 kids as we move forward, Ryan. And there's it's a big weekend. It's a big weekend because there's a couple positions right now that you look at and say, you've got to be able to hit on those guys. And so let's begin, Ryan, with the secondary. And there's 2 Notre Dame commits on campus, going to be on campus this weekend. Leonard Moore from Texas is coming up. He's going to be on campus for Friday's practice and Saturday's practice. As of right now, Carson Hobbs, from Cincinnati is coming up for Saturday. Why is Notre Dame bringing 2 commits on campus at cornerback? Well, Notre Dame is also hosting a couple big-time cornerbacks this weekend. That would be Aaron Scott out of Springfield, Ohio, who Notre Dame fans, if you watched Christian Gray's film this year, you should be familiar with Aaron Scott because he faced him. A big-time top 100 caliber cornerback from Ohio that Notre Dame staff is very high on. And then a name that I know you all know that's also going to be on campus, and that's Caleb Beasley, who is a Tennessee commit who Notre Dame really is high on. Really high on, and obviously liked a lot. I thought Notre Dame had a great shot. I think Tennessee rode their hot start to the season into an in-state commitment for him. He's still committed to Tennessee, but anytime a kid's going to take visits, that's a good thing. I think he's going to go to Auburn this offseason. He's also going to go to Notre Dame. So if Notre Dame's going to have a shot with to flip Caleb Beasley, they need to make a move this weekend. And so you bring your commits on campus, you bring Aaron Scott on campus, and you say, hey, look, we got 3 guys that we think are absolute studs. We had one of them on campus last weekend, and John Mitchell. We love you 2 guys as well. You guys are the key to really making this thing happen, right? And that's going to be the pitch from Mike Mickens this weekend. So really important, I think, to get the corners on campus because what you are showing, Ryan, by getting the commit corners on campus with these kids is, hey, we want you, right? Like we want you with us, not just like, well, I'm bringing you in to compete with this guy. We're doing this together. And in today's football, you need lots and lots of corners. and we need you guys with us so we can go out there and beat Ohio State and beat Alabama and beat Georgia and beat those teams. I think it says a lot about those committed corners, and I think it says a lot about how the Notre Dame staff views their committed corners, in that these kids are going to not – it could go wrong, Ryan. Hey, I don't want that guy coming here and compete with me, so I'm not going to be a jerk to him. But that's not what these kids are going to do. That's why they're bringing them on campus. I think that's a great recruiting tactic. It says a lot about the Notre Dame commits, but these two kids coming on campus, Ryan, are big time.
They really are. I mean, we don't have to show you guys. Well, we actually have watched film about these players before, so we can go back and just watch what Aaron Scott and what Caleb Beasley bring to the table, right? But I think you hit on a few key things there, Brian, is that one, Notre Dame fans that watch this channel, you've heard directly from Carson Hobbs in the past, because he literally came on the show, big personality, right? Which I think is very inviting to a type of visit. And one cool thing too, Brian, is that where's Aaron Scott from? He's from Ohio. Where's Carson Hobbs from? He's also from Ohio. Tennessee, Caleb Beasley, a little more of the Southern kind of feel to it, right? Well, where is Leonard Moore from? He's from Texas, right? Like, you got guys that kind of have some parallels to one another as well in the committed class for Notre Dame that I think will be inviting to this conversation. We'll be inviting to this visit. These are going to be hard pulls. Let's call it what it is, right? Caleb Beasley is literally committed to the University of Tennessee right now. Aaron Scott is in a part of Ohio that is usually just a pretty easy feeder to Ohio State, right? Like, it's not a secret. But the fact of the matter is that Notre Dame's able to get both these guys on campus. Mike Mickens, what he's been doing the last couple years at the cornerback position is telling, and everyone knows it, and everyone understands what he's been doing. And you have two of your cornerbacks on campus that are very talented. And I haven't gotten to know Leonard Moore as much as I've known Carson Hobbs, but Carson Hobbs is a big personality, man. And I know he's going to be attractive as far as his ability to talk to these dudes, right? So pull out all the stops, see what you're working with. Notre Dame has three incredibly top-tier corners on this board. You mentioned John Mitchell. You mentioned these two, obviously, with Caleb Beasley and with Aaron Scott. Notre Dame has a chance to hopefully move the needle with at least one of these guys this weekend, or hopefully both. Hopefully you move the needle with both guys. But regardless, anytime Notre Dame gets guys that come on campus, especially Caleb Beasley's now been on campus a couple of times. He was at the Irish Invasion, obviously the past summer. So getting this guys on campus is a big step for Notre Dame. Pull out all the stops and see what you can make happen, man. See if you can make some magic happen this weekend. But it's a big step to just get Beasley and Scott on campus in general.
I don't know if either of them are likely, to be honest with you. It's going to be hard to get either one of them. But when you land Moore and Hobbs this early, you can shoot for the stars. And that's what Notre Dame is doing with John Mitchell, Aaron Scott, and Caleb Beasley. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. So I'm curious to see who they get. And I'd be happy with all three of them. I love John Mitchell. He's probably the guy that fans know the least about, from what I can gather from conversations. He is absolutely a guy, though, that I love in this class. I'd be happy with all three of those guys. I really would. 100%. They're very talented players. There's no one that I'd be like, well, I don't know if I love that guy. You give me one of those three guys, and I'll be honest with you, a guy that I like that was on the cornerback board that's now off of it is Jeremiah Newcomb, who honestly was the one guy I liked, but didn't like him as much as the other guys. He's a little smaller for me, a little shorter for me. He doesn't run quite as well as those other guys, but good football player, good pickup for Oklahoma. So all the guys you really wanted are still on the board.
Yep.
Let's stay on defense, Ryan. And Notre Dame's got three really important defensive line guys coming on campus this weekend. I want to give you kind of the latest on those three guys and just kind of what we think of them. Jared and Jacob Smith, who are now at Cheshire Academy in Connecticut. So they have transferred schools this offseason. And Darian Mayo he's from Good Counsel, correct? In Olney, in Maryland.
Correct.
Yeah, will be on campus as well. Kind of just share the latest with those guys, Ryan, and then we'll talk about who these guys are as players.
Sure. I mean, if we're going to start a little bit with the Smith twins, right? They're guys that Notre Dame fans know a lot about because they're guys that we've been talking about, and Notre Dame's been in good standing with the Smith twins for, it seems like, forever at this point, right? Like they've been on campus before. This is a return trip for them. Brian, they're an interesting conversation piece because they are both very different football players, right? Jacob Smith is more that Viper type. I think last time he was on campus, he weighed in at 6'4", 227 pounds, somewhere on there, right? And then Jared Smith is the 6'3", 250-pound type of strong side defensive end. He's a little bit more of that power profile guy. The question that Notre Dame fans are going to have is that, like, how do they fit? And if it's a package deal, does that take a guy off the board that you necessarily would also want to bring into the class? Like, that's the question. I don't think anybody questions that the Smith twins are good players. It's just about, if you take both, is there a guy that might be a better player that you're not able to quite take into the class anymore? That's where you are. But the Smiths are high on Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame also very much likes the Smith twins. The big thing for me, Brian, is that every time I talk to either Jacob or Jared, they don't have a clear defined timeline for making a decision, right? So, Is that going to happen this summer? Is it going to bleed into the season? When are they going to pop is the biggest question. Because they kind of leave it up like, we'll know when we know, but we're not going to rush. And there just doesn't seem much urgency to making a decision, which is fine. That's their choice, right? But at the end of the day, if you're Notre Dame and you're trying to attract a lot of great defensive players, trying to understand what timelines look like for certain guys is very important, right? It's very important. So that's kind of what the Smith twins. Darian Mayo is a guy that I think this is going to be a very important visit. I've had the chance to talk to Darian in the past and very intrigued by Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it, right? But he hasn't been on campus yet before. So anytime it's a first trip to campus, there's going to be some questions about, just what is the fits? How much do you like the program going into the visit, and how much they can move the needle with you after the visit? And he's a 6'6", 6'6.5", 240, 250 pound defensive end that has crazy amount of upside. He's a bit raw, but developmentally he has big time potential at defensive end. So first visit to campus has a chance to be a momentum building process with Notre Dame, because Notre Dame needs to have a bigger impact in the DMV area. They need to have an impact in some of these Maryland Catholic schools, right? And getting into good counsel would be a good start, I think. So we'll see what obviously happens with Darian Mayo this weekend if they're able to move the needle with him.
I love Darian Mayo as a player, man. He's so raw. This is the kind of kid that Notre Dame needs to get, Ryan. They're not going to they're just not going to often get, as much as we'd like it, they're just not going to often get the big time 5-star edge player that's not from their backyard. It just isn't going to happen a lot. Yep. This is the kind of kid, though, Ryan, that I think you can get and thrive with. And the kind of guy that I think you can land and say, you get a guy like this, and he may not be a top 50 guy right now, but the tools are there for him to be a stud. That's what I loved about when Notre Dame landed Isaiah Foskey. People ask, who'd you get right, who you get wrong? Foskey's a guy that I got right, because he had 4.5-star upside to me, 5-star upside to me. And you look at a guy like that and you say, now that's the kind of guy that you look at and say, he may not be that guy now, and there's some work that needs to be done and lower floor and all that kind of stuff. But if he hits, he's going to be a dude. And they got that. That's the kind of guy that they need to get. Because at the end of the day, here's what matters, Ryan. People focus too much on 5 stars. I don't care if Notre Dame never signs another 5-star recruit who is a 5-star. They need more 5-star players. That's what they need.
Yep.
Give me more 5-star players. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah was not a 5-star recruit. He was a 5-star college football player because he needed time to get there. Isaiah needed 2 years before he was really ready, 2 full seasons before he was able to break out in his third, where a Keon Keeley may be able to do that in year 1 or year 2. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so that, to me, is kind of what Notre Dame needs. Is Darian Mayos are the kind of guys, if you can hit on a kid like that every year, it's like Boubacar last year. If Boubacar was close to his full potential, he's probably getting huge NIL deals thrown at him last year.
Yep.
But he's raw, and he was injured, so he kind of flew under the radar. He ranks really low on my board right now from where they are right now, but there's not a guy on the defensive class last year, in my view, that has a higher ceiling. Those are the kids Notre Dame's got to land more of moving forward. I don't know if they have a shot at Darian Mayo. You would know better than me. We're both still trying to kind of learn more about him. Yep. But this is the kind of kid that you have to blow away during the visit, because this is the kind of kid that may not be a needle mover today. He won't be a guy that gets fans fired up. But if he clicks, he has big time talent. This kid is raw. I think, Ryan, didn't you tell me he's only played football for like 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 years. He was another kid that was like an AAU basketball player, if I remember correctly. So
tons of upside.
Yep.
I love this kid on film, and I also agree with you on the Smiths. They're good football players.
Yep.
The Viper kid, and that would be Jacob, right?
Correct. Yep.
Is definitely better than Jared, in my opinion.
Agree.
And that's my concern is they're a package deal as far as I know, right?
Yes. Yep.
And I'm just not sure with where they are. I want to see how the board shakes out. I like them both. They're good players. I want to see them develop, but I'm okay with it playing out with a lot of guys. Like I'm okay right now with Bryce Young not rushing to make a commitment because I want to see how the board plays out. I don't want these guys to take spots before you get a shot to make an impression on a Darian Mayo. Or, maybe you can get some movement with Logan Thomas or a Malachi Williams. Like, don't rush into commitments. That's the big thing for me. It's March. And so I'm okay with these kids taking their time and Notre Dame taking their time. But there's good football players on campus there.
And you also have Malachi Williams, the guy that you just mentioned. He's coming in for the blue and gold game too, right? So, let's see how these visits this spring and into the summer, how they fill out and how they move the needle. He's another guy. Brian, we know this, and you know this a lot better than I do because you've been following recruiting a lot longer than I have, right? But when you get a player on campus for the first time, that can change the game, man. Like Darian Mayo has never been on campus. Malachi Williams has never been on campus. You get him on campus and you move the needle over the next few weeks, then maybe we're talking about a completely different looking board. Like that's kind of where we could be. I mean, honestly, in a few weeks, it's not like hyperbolic to be like that. This board could look a lot different after the blue gold game, like astronomically different.
Absolutely. Let's look at some more guys, Ryan, that Notre Dame's going to have on campus this weekend in the front seven. Bradley Shaw visited yesterday. Yep. Not quite sure where he stands with Notre Dame. He's from Hoover High School in Alabama. And then another player, Ryan, that I'm not sure where Notre Dame stands with him, and I'm not sure where he stands with Notre Dame, and that's Cole Sullivan from Central Catholic in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
This is going to be an interesting weekend because, Ryan, it is still a bit unknown to me just how much he likes Notre Dame and vice versa. I think there's an assumption that he's a no-brainer going to pick Notre Dame kind of kid. I don't think that's true. I think that they've got to work if they're going to land Cole Sullivan. So I think we should get a lot more how do I say this? We should get a lot more clarity on both sides after this weekend with Cole Sullivan.
I agree. And I've talked to parents of Cole in the past, and I get the same vibe, Brian. I think that for me, Cole is high on Notre Dame, but I also think that there's programs like Penn State that he's also very higher on. I mean, and that makes sense, right? Yeah. In Michigan, yeah. Like there's some other schools in this conversation. This isn't just a Notre Dame no-brainer type of conversation, right? So getting him on campus, though, I mean, this is going to be Cole's third time on campus. He was at 2 different games last year for game visits, but we know these types of visits are much better for like that one-on-one interaction between coaches, between Cole, his family. Again, getting those verified measurables are always nice too, because he's a kid that's listed at 6'3", 200 pounds. So like, has he gained weight this offseason? Is he a legit 6'2.5", 6'3"? Like those questions will obviously be answered. But I think you hit on it perfectly.
6'4"? Can he be a Viper?
Yeah.
Could he be a guy? Because I think there's some thought there with Notre Dame staff too, Ryan, is how's this kid filling out his frame since we saw him in the fall? Because he may be a guy that you say, hey, if we can't get a Viper in this class, this kid may be a linebacker, but he also may be a kid that grows into a Viper because he's really long. Yeah. He's a thin long. And that's a question that I'm curious to see is kind of how he's filled out a little bit. I don't think he can grow into a Viper, but I know there's some people that think that he might be able to. So that's another thing that we're going to learn a little bit this weekend as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what his body looks like in general. Like it really, I think, will be interesting because, like you said, I mean, is he a guy that has another growth spurt left? I mean, kids develop at different spots, right? Like this isn't just a cyclical thing and just a exponent, like a straight line, a linear thing where like everyone develops at the same exact times in their life. That's just not how it is, right? Like Tim Duncan grew 2 inches when he was at Wake Forest when he was in his 20s. I mean, this stuff happens all the time for some kids. So seeing the body type, seeing what the interest in, and I think Notre Dame, if this is a guy you want, like you affirm that this weekend, right? You make the pitch and move it forward and see if you can kind of, escalate this recruitment a little bit. Like I think that a lot of stuff is on the line this week for Cole Sullivan, and understanding what the true interest in is very important in this one.
Let's move on to the offensive side of the ball, Ryan. The only kind of big name 2024 kids, not big name, important, I would say. That's a disrespectful term too. I say just the guys that we need to discuss, right? We'll go there because I don't think kids aren't important or whatever. But there's 2 offensive linemen coming on campus this weekend, Ryan, and they'll both be here, I believe, Saturday, I believe.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And that is Caleb Brewer coming Friday? Let me pull up.
I'm sorry.
My breakdown.
They're both coming the 31st. They're both
okay. So I was told that there's a chance Caleb Brewer stays for parts of 2 days and then goes somewhere else on Saturday. So he may stay for kind of part of a couple days. And then Kevin Haywood is coming in tonight, and then we'll be staying tomorrow, I believe, is what he's doing. Yeah. So, what's that, Ryan?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that Caleb Brewer, I know, was going to hit Michigan sometime on April 1st. I don't know if it's
so that's what I'm thinking. He's going to come in. He's going to be here tomorrow, stay the night, and then get up, probably have a quick meeting at Notre Dame, and then head to Michigan is what I believe is what we're going to see.
Yep.
These are 2 very interesting players, Ryan. I love Caleb Brewer.
Same.
Love Caleb Brewer. I don't know where Notre Dame is with him. I don't know that one. So we'll find that out. He's another clarity guy. We're going to get some clarity. And the reason I don't know is because you have a new coach. And I know that Joe Rudolph recruited him to Virginia Tech, but I don't know kind of what their relationship is like. And the other one is Kevin Haywood. I don't know where he stands with Notre Dame either. I know there's some people at Notre Dame that really like Kevin Haywood. I don't know how Joe Rudolph feels about him. I know how I feel about him, and he's an interesting player. That's we'll just leave it at that for now, Ryan. But I'm very curious how this weekend is what kind of clarity we might get when it comes to offensive line targets coming out of this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Caleb, it's going to be a really telling weekend for me, Brian, because he is a guy that's excited about Notre Dame. Like, there's no doubt about it. He has been for a couple months. I know he was originally trying to visit sometime in, I think, early March or late February was when he was trying to visit originally. And then like the timing of everything just didn't work out, right? So he was bummed. I remember when he had to delay it into the end of May, coming on May 31st. But I think for me, that's a kid that has continued to, blow up a little bit on the recruiting trail. He's getting some legitimate looks now. I mean, Penn State, Tennessee, like those types of dudes are offering a guy like a Caleb Brewer. I have been maintaining that if Notre Dame pushes for Caleb, and I truly believe this, that this would be a Notre Dame-Penn State battle, like just straight up. That's what I think it is. So this weekend, Notre Dame has a chance to push if they choose to push, right? Like, and I think that they have a chance at Caleb, a legitimate chance, if they do take that step. So that'll be interesting to see. Kevin Haywood is a completely different animal, man. He's got a ton of offers, and he's going on like this 2-week just like round trip of like going everywhere. I posted in my update on him like a week or 2 ago where like he literally sent me his like travel schedule, and I'm just like, dang, dude, like you go to school ever? Like that's wild. Like he's just traveling everywhere, man. So he's a kid that we'll have more clarity on after the weekend. But I think he's another one though, Brian. Like there's some more visits after this, right? So like we might have to wait like another week or 2 before we get like legitimate clarity to understand like what places did he really like? What places was he not a great fit in? What places is he, going to continue to really press and want to be able to go back again? Like there's just a little bit more of an advanced timeline, I think, for Kevin Haywood. I mean, I give credit to him and his family. Like they have a legitimate schedule for him, man.
Yes.
Like, he is to put this visit schedule together is honestly very impressive. I could not do it. Do it. So hats off to the Haywood family, man. But
I would be worn out.
I know he's seeing like Miami, Tennessee. He's going to be training down in Florida for a couple days too.
He's not going to like Ohio. Like here's an easy trip. You're a PA kid. You go to Pennsylvania. You swing by Pitt on your way over to Ohio State. You shoot up to Ann Arbor. You shoot over to Notre Dame. You shoot over to Wisconsin, then head down to Illinois, and then back home.
Yes.
That's a doable trip. Right?
The Midwest swing. Yeah,
he's going everywhere. It's not like, you hop in your car in a week and a half. We visited all these great schools. No, this kid is going everywhere. Yes. And it's an impressive thing by the family. They're and the thing that's good about it is he's going to get experience a lot of different types of places and programs. Whereas if you just visited Notre Dame and a bunch of Big Ten schools, you're going to see a lot of the same thing. Yep. He's going to have a lot more to compare when he thinks about what's important to him after making this trip, which is good. He's a big physical kid, Ryan. That's for darn sure.
Massive,
that's the one thing.
Man.
He's a big physical kid with a lot of power. There's no doubt. No doubt.
He's one of the most physically advanced players on the board, Brian. I mean, he's like 6'7", 295 right now, right? Yes. Like he's a Big
long,
kid. Yeah.
a long kid. There's no doubt
Yes.
about it. Ryan, let's get to the 25 class. There's 3 kids that I want to focus on. Obviously, we talked about Trey McNutt visited this Wednesday. I think it says something. We won't talk about Trey because he's already been on campus, but I do think it says something that a kid like him who's from Ohio, he's got a pretty good offer list, gets offered by Notre Dame and sets up a visit this quickly. I think shows a good early interest. The 3 guys I want to talk about are coming this weekend. And we're going to begin at quarterback because it's the best position out there, as I say, with no bias as a former quarterback at all. Totally objective opinion. Yeah. But Deuce Knight's on campus this weekend, Ryan, and I know this is a guy that you and I are very, very high on. It's early yet. There's going to be no quarterback commitments coming anytime soon. But I think it says a lot that Deuce is going through he's setting up his own busy visit schedule. The fact that a kid from Mississippi, Loosedale, Mississippi, is making time this early to head up to South Bend says a lot about this. I love this kid's upside.
And I think this is a big credit to the Notre Dame staff on Deuce Knight right now, Brian, because every time I talk to Deuce, he just talks all the time about Notre Dame makes me feel like an absolute priority, and they tell me all the time how high they are on me, like consistently. That's the first thing out.
Everybody. I mean, that's not just recruiting spin, Ryan. They love this kid.
Yes.
Love this kid.
Yeah. And he was a kid that I have a recruiting update that's coming on him or a visit preview that's coming out on him soon. And Brian, like he talked to me about that he doesn't know that much about Notre Dame, right? Like he knows the name. He knows that they like him.
Yes. The relationships is why he's coming up.
100%.
He's not coming up because he grew up watching Notre Dame on television and knows about the championships and the Heisman Trophy. He's coming up because of the relationships. That's a great place for Notre Dame to be, Ryan.
Yeah, it really is, man. It really is. I think Notre Dame's doing a great job in that recruitment early. He's 6'4", 185 pounds, super athletic, has a cannon for an arm. There's a lot to like about Deuce Knight, man. And he's a Mississippi kid, man. Like, that's so unique. Like, you don't see too many Mississippi kids visiting Notre Dame. Like, and he's a high academic kid.
And you know what else you don't see, Ryan? Very many lefties that I like their film.
I hate
lefty quarterbacks. I love Deuce Knight. Deuce Knight.
Oh, man. I'm really excited for him to get up and see it because he doesn't know what to expect. Like, he's legitimately curious about Notre Dame. One good thing, though, of note as far as, like, the people that are going to say, like, but can you get him out of the South? His brother, I just found this out yesterday, is Ty Freifogel that played at Indiana, the wide receiver. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so, I mean, his family is okay, obviously, with going up north, and they've been to Indiana. So
it means he's been to Indiana, too. He knows what the weather's like. So that's very interesting.
Yep.
I'll say this, Ryan. He right now ranks number 3 on my board at quarterback behind Bryce Underwood and George McIntyre. But I think those guys are 5 stars. I mean, those are top 15 overall national players. Deuce is a clear top 100 guy. I'll be honest with you. Deuce might be the ideal quarterback to land the year after getting CJ Carr.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is I think I have to feel that Deuce seems like a really smart kid. He knows he needs work. He knows he's going to need time to get strong. He's very skinny. And you can see it on the photo at Irish Breakdown of him, Ryan. Very thin, skinny kid. Going to need a lot of time. Going to need development as a player. He's a guy that you can convince, hey, man, come here, red shirt, give us time to build you up. CJ's going to be here. CJ's going to play early. CJ's probably could potentially be a 3-year guy. And you're going to, by time, you're going to learn a ton from CJ, who's a very fundamentally sound, smart quarterback. Be a great thing for you. And then when CJ goes and he's a top 10 NFL draft pick, then you got 2-3 years to still be a starter. And then we're going to turn you into a top 10 NFL draft pick. Compared to a guy like Bryce Underwood, I love Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood's not a guy that's going to want to sit for very long.
No.
Nor should he, because he's a dude. So it's going to make landing a guy like him really hard, in my opinion. Deuce has got a incredibly high ceiling, but he's a kid that you might be able to convince to be a little bit more patient. And I think that's the kind of kid you want to land the year after getting CJ Carr. And you got to look into that. You got to look at that kind of stuff, Ryan. You got to think about that kind of stuff.
Was it you, Brian, that compared him to Hendon Hooker a little bit from
left-handed version of Hendon
Hooker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really, I mean, because Hendon Hooker's a perfect example, man. He didn't develop, and to no fault of his own a little bit, right? But he didn't develop until his third, fourth year in college, right? Like that's kind of that trajectory. And again, it's not apples to apples here, but Deuce is that high upside raw kid that year 3 is probably going to be where his real impact is shown on a team and on a roster. So yeah, I'd be totally fine with them taking a shot at a kid like a Deuce Knight. And again, man, like if you're comfortable with quarterback development, if Gino Guidugli is the real deal as a quarterback developer, why would you not want to work with Deuce Knight, man? Like that kid is silly.
If Gino Guidugli can take Desmond Ridder and turn him into a third-round draft pick and a college football playoff quarterback, what is he going to do with a guy like Deuce Knight?
Seriously, man. Seriously.
You know what I mean? Like that is like, okay, yeah, that's some tools to work with. Now, is he going to need time? Yeah, he's going to need time. But he's got like you said, Ryan, he's got easy power.
Yep.
And that's kind of quarterback you want. Is not the guy that like has to like put high effort. I've said this before. You don't want a guy that's got to really torque to get power on the ball. This kid is just easy snapping it off. Yes. And he's 185 pounds. You know.
I'll say this, like the passing tools that he has as a thrower, if he was just a pocket quarterback, Brian, and he threw the football the way he did, I would be so high on Deuce Knight. But then it's like the third highlight on his highlight film where you're like, oh, he can run. Yeah.
Let's actually pull it up a little bit because we're sitting there hyping Deuce up, and I want people to kind of see him. We're not going to necessarily break down the film. We're just going to let it play while we're talking about him. But you'll see in the film the rent very raw.
Yes,
but just a gamer, man. Just a kid can play.
And he doesn't play on a great team either, man. So like I talked about this before.
Oh no, this isn't the run.
It's just the nice strike over the middle.
Easy zip right there, man. That is really easy zip right there. I think this is the play, right?
That's it right here. Yeah.
Okay,
look at that speed, man.
And he's like, again, he's galloping, man. He's got that long stride. He just covers a lot of ground. Is this the deep ball he throws, or is that's coming later? This might be it. No, he's got a like that's such bad technique, but the ball like just keeps going and going, and going and going. You know, he's got to protect the ball a little bit more in the pocket. Love the touch there. This kid's got some tools. Is this the bomb? There's a throw he makes. No, this isn't it. He's got a little too much Michael Vick. Like get that ball down. You know, like protect the ball, son. You know, but
dude, dude, like what do you do with that, man?
And there's good football in Mississippi. Yes. There really is. There really is. I want to get to that throw that he just bombs it, Ryan. It's just like
he looks like a javelin thrower. Like it has turnover on it. Like man,
this isn't it. No. There's the one he throws over the top. Might be a different film. He throws one over the top. You're just like, good Lord. Like that ball just kept
ball placement on there too is pretty nice too, man.
Yeah, he has a good feel for he's raw in a lot of ways, but he's raw technically, physically, but he's not raw from a feel for the games. This isn't just some athlete that you got to teach to play quarterback. This is a quarterback who's never been taught the finer points of the game from a technical standpoint. But this kid has a great feel for the game. You can see the intelligence. Look at him like right there, just keeping his eyes downfield.
Yep.
You know, trying to find someone open. Is this the throw? No, this isn't it.
And I remember
slant route between two dudes, man. That was the rope.
And I remember talking about him, right, Brian? This is a kid too, where he plays on not a great football team, right? So he has to do a lot for his team, man. And I think that hurts him a little bit from some technical aspects. Like he has to play backyard ball a little bit, right? He has to play a little bit of hero ball, but he can do it, man. He can do it.
Yeah. Well, that's my thing is you get him on an offense where he can actually be coached and it's the argument that I made yesterday about Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
If Lamar could go to a team that will say, hey, we want you to be a pocket passer that uses your athleticism to this. No, that's not it. We want you to use your athleticism as sort of a scrambler in the pass game, not as a runner, you know, and teach him to be a little bit more. Hey, you don't need to leave the pocket when you run around to buy time, but keep your eyes downfield, like things like that. I think Lamar could be I think Lamar had a great first year, but I don't think he's been a star ever since. I think Lamar could be a star if he goes to the right offense. And that's how I feel about Deuce, Ryan. Like use him as a runner, occasionally some read zones and stuff like that, but use his legs as a passer. But you already see him showing the feel for that though. You'll see him running around, Ryan, and keeping his eyes downfield, like he's looking for someone to hit. He doesn't take off running until when he's moving around in the pocket until, okay, nobody's there, or I've got no one in front of me. He's willing to use his legs to buy time for his arm.
Yes.
And to see that in a sophomore is something I really like. I
really like his ball placement on a lot of throws too, man. Like he gets the ball in good spots. Like they're not usually terrible spots, and like it's just so much to like about this kid, man. Like again, if I'm a quarterback coach, I look at this kid and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make that kid a Heisman Trophy winner. Like that's my thought process, honestly. Like that's my thought. He really could be that type of dude, I think.
And he'll be on campus this weekend. It's again, this is the weekend that isn't gonna, he's not gonna come out of him like, oh, I'm going to Notre Dame. I don't see that. Here's why this visit is important, Orion. This visit's going to tell us if Notre Dame's got a shot. That's going to be the thing. This is the visit that's going to say, okay, I can see myself there. They're definitely going to be a factor moving forward. Yeah. And then he'll commit like a year or something like that to someone. That's really what Notre Dame's goal needs to be in this particular visit, Ryan, it's okay, can you get him to say you can see yourself being here, so when you move forward, we're going to be a factor for you. Yep. That's the goal. That's the goal on this particular visit. Would you agree with that?
Yes, 100%. I mean, this is laying the groundwork because, I mean, like we talked about it already, right? He doesn't know what to expect at Notre Dame. Like he has no idea what to expect. This is a groundwork thing. This isn't a you're coming to commit type of situation, right? Like he's interested in Notre Dame. Notre Dame is making him feel like a very high priority for them. But at the end of the day, this is a feel out and really see if do I fit on this campus? Do I fit with this demographic of people? Like this is an important one to just understand fit more than anything.
Yeah. So we're going to find out what happens with Deuce Knight and if Notre Dame can be a player. That he's a natural thrower too, Ryan. That's the other thing is you get some of these kids that are just really athletic and they're just not they don't have a natural throwing motion. He has it's long because he's long.
Yep.
But Sam Hartman has a long throwing motion. It's natural. And this kid is a natural football player. You can just everything about Ryan, just how his feel for the game, all of it is just he's just a natural football player. And with work, this kid's got a chance to be a star. He really does.
He's one of those kids, man. Put good development and resources around him, and he's going to thrive, in my opinion, because I go back to it, man. He doesn't play at the best school in the world. He doesn't play with the best talent in the world. But if you put the right development around him, I think he could be a star. I really do.
Agree. We'll see. It's going to be fun to watch how he develops over the next couple of years. There's another kid coming on campus this weekend, Ryan, that I like a lot, and that is a linebacker from Baltimore. He goes to St. Francis Academy. Carlton Scott is going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan. I mean, the best compliment that I can pay Carlton Scott is he reminds me a lot of Jaden Alsbury. And for anyone that's listened to this show for any length of time, you know what kind of compliment that is.
Yes.
Except I think he's a little bit more of a natural thumper than Jaden was at the same age. This is another one where this is not he's coming to commit thing. This is more of if you want to be in the game with him moving forward, you have to have a good week with him or good visit with him on Saturday. I think that's the key. So he's a 25 kid, Ryan. He's a good football player. I really like that kid's film.
Yeah, man, he's physical. He's super physical. He's a downhill type of dude, but he can move, man. Like Carlton can really change direction well. He's got kind of that range to him. He's that guy that he's a will right at the next level, most likely when it's all said and done. But he is one of those playmakers, the kids that are going to, look at it and you're like, wow, he just stuffed the stat sheet, man. Like he had 5 sacks and 3 interceptions and 10 tackles for loss. Like
we're talking about over the course of a season.
Yes, in a season. Yeah, not for a game. Not a game. In a season, though, you're going to look at it and be like, man, that guy just was everywhere, man. Like hair on fire, just physical, explosive. Carlton's a good player, man. He's a really good player. And we've already talked about the Maryland area, right? Mm-hmm. Got to keep getting into those type of spaces. St. Francis Academy should be a spot that is very good to Notre Dame at times. Like that should be a spot. The DeMatha Catholics, St. Francis Academies. We've talked about those types of schools before. And Notre Dame's targeting a couple St. Francis kids. Not only Carlton, but the 2 corners are from St. Francis in 2025 as well. Kevin Humes and the other kid's name is escaping me for a second. But
it's a D lineman, isn't it?
They have both corners on the board for
Both
Notre
corners?
Dame.
Okay.
Yeah, Kevin Humes, who just visited, and then the other corners whose name is escaping
I'll
me for
find it
some
while
reason.
you keep talking.
Yeah, but St. Francis Academy has a chance to be good to Notre Dame in 2025. Getting Carlton on campus early is a good starting point, good sign. But at the end of the day, 2025 kids, man, it's about really showing what you can offer to them,
Yeah.
right? Because
Get
it's
in the game. That's the key
100%.
right now. Get yourself in the game.
No
And
doubt.
that's going to be the key. You talking about Blake Woodby?
Blake Woodby. Yep, he
Okay.
plays on the other side of Kevin Humes at
Okay.
corner. Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. I know that there's some front seven kids from the area. I know there's a kid from DC that plays D tackle.
Yep.
So it's a good, and Notre Dame went out to see them, like St. Joseph's in Philly. I haven't had a lot of success with recently, but they went out. Al Golden was there like 3 times during
Anthony
the open
Saka,
visit period.
baby. Yep.
Yeah. So that's another dude. There's Ryan. It's such a loaded class.
Really
I
is,
can't
man.
wait to find out when Saka's going to be on campus. I didn't realize that's Tony Saka's kid who played at Penn State. I didn't realize.
Yeah,
this.
he played.
Penn State.
I told you on a podcast. He
Yeah.
he
I wasn't
played
on
with
that
Al
show.
Golden.
I
He
thought
played with
it was
Al
you
Golden.
and Sean. Oh, you
May
did
have
tell me
been.
that. That's right. You did tell me
Yeah.
that. You did tell me that. Now that
Yep.
you say that, I do remember that now. But yeah, he was a pretty good quarterback for Penn State back in the day. Played against Notre Dame, obviously, as you know. Beat Notre Dame.
Yes.
Tony Saka beat Notre Dame. Well, I think he's the guy that threw that touchdown pass to Al Golden when they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. So
And Saka's going to be on campus for the Blue Gold game. So
there you go.
Yeah.
He is a dude.
Yeah, man.
He is an absolute dude. There's another player, Ryan, that they're bringing on campus this week that I like. I don't know if you had a chance to watch him, but it's Isaiah Mosey from Lee Summit, Missouri. Goes to North High
Wide
School,
receiver.
Lee Summit North. Wide receiver. I like this kid, right? He's a good football player. There's not a ton of great receivers on the board right now for Notre Dame, but he's a guy that'll be on campus this weekend that is a good football player that I'm definitely keeping an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to watch him enough at this point, but he's another Missouri guy, man. So, like, keep feeding that pipeline, baby. Give me that Missouri talent.
Are they doing, like, with receivers and running backs in Missouri? Like, where are all these kids coming from? But he's a really smooth kid, Ryan. Very fluid, can stretch the field. Good size, 6'1", 180. Looks to have better speed. Like, he's one of those kids, Ryan, that doesn't look fast because he's so smooth, but he just keeps running by people, and that's something that you look at and you say, well, okay, he may not look explosive, but nobody can cover him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's a really good football player. And I don't know a lot about him now other than just watching his film, Ryan.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious to see kind of what he can bring to the table, in my opinion. He's another interesting one that's going to be on campus this weekend.
Yep. And like you said, I mean, the wide receiver board is going to be interesting in 2025. There's a couple nice players. There's a few good players. There's no doubt, but it's about trying to figure out what the fits are, and really see what the target list is. I mean, we've talked about Taylor a lot on this podcast, obviously, but there's some other dudes on the 2025 board that are extremely talented, but what are the priority lists, right? Because I don't think there's like a huge separation in some of those groups, right? It's like there's a few good players, but like, is one really separating from the other? Do they just kind of blend into a group? I'm really looking to see what the separation is at wide receiver for Notre Dame in 2025.
I know one guy that I want them to get. Notre Dame is going to get. That's Jalen Taylor. That's my dude right there, man.
Yep.
He's so dynamic. But again, Missouri is an area that's been very good to Notre Dame in recent years. How will this be a kid that becomes that kind of guy? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And to the point now where it's like Notre Dame's kind of like Jeremiah McClellan. I know Notre Dame likes Jeremiah McClellan, but they haven't really pushed for him as hard as maybe they could have because the board is so loaded in 24 and 25, in my opinion.
And every time I talk to Jeremiah, he just hasn't scheduled a visit. So, like, at some point, it's like, if you don't get back on campus, it's probably not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yep, absolutely. All right, Ryan. So that's going to kind of be the guys on campus. Anybody else that you want to mention before we move on to the mailbag, Mr. Roberts?
I did have a notes, and there was a on message board, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Ryan Gee, who is a tight end out of Georgia, will be back on campus again this weekend. He was on campus last weekend with his mom. He liked it so much. Literally hit me up. Is like, I loved it so much. I want to bring my dad and my little brother to come see it. So 2 weekends in a row, Ryan Gee will be on campus at Notre Dame.
Now, there's going to be the initial, is he going to commit this weekend? I do not see that happening. I don't think he's necessarily in a hurry to commit right now, and I don't think Notre Dame is necessarily in a hurry to take a commitment in the 2025 tight end room because it's so loaded. There's only one 2025 tight end that I would take right now, Ryan. Like that I would take if you called him to commit right now, I would take him right now. That's James
Flanagan.
Yeah. Because like they're all kind of very similar players, but that legacy aspect I'm always going to give. But like there's a lot of good players and they're different. James Flanagan is a completely different type of player than Ryan Gee.
Yes.
Like completely different type of tight end.
Yep.
And so I think part of it is okay, who do you get in the 24 class? If you get Jade Riddell, that's going to mean one thing. If you get Carter Nelson, it may mean another thing. So there's just time. Right. There's time there. But I got a chance to stand next to Ryan Gee. He looks more like a basketball recruit right now than a football recruit.
Yeah.
Like he looks like a small forward that the basketball team is recruiting. Right.
He was, I mean, we had a verified measurement on him. He said he was 6'5" and a half and 239 pounds, man. Like he's a big boy, man. He's a really big boy.
Yeah. So it's going to be good to get him back on campus. Obviously, they're a player. They're going to be a player there. That's going to be a key. So, Ryan, we're going to go to the mailbag next. So if you all have some questions, get those mailbag questions in now. We got about 17 or 18 of them in right now. So definitely get those in now. But before we transition to the mailbag, I'm going to ask y'all to do that same. If you haven't done it, do that same favor that I asked you to do earlier. Hit that like button. It's that little thumbs up that looks just like this right below there. If you're listening via podcast, we would love it if you'd give us a 5-star review. It would greatly help us out a ton. Share this podcast, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. If you're listening not live, leave us a comment, what you think of the show. If you have some questions, we'd love to ask questions there too, because that kind of interaction helps us with the algorithm. I don't know how it does, but that it does. And helps us get in front of more people. And if you haven't done it, Ryan, we had some really good intel. Ryan actually hadn't read it because he's, working hard for me and doing a great job. So he hadn't had a chance to read it yet. So I had him read it before the show. And he's like, oh, that was good stuff, Ryan. Some good, juicy stuff. I have to share with you after the show what I have on the defense so far.
Yes.
But we'll have a defensive intel piece over the next couple of days. I just got a couple more sources I want to hear from and see kind of how things are. So you're definitely going to want to sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Let's get to the mailbag, Mr. Roberts. And we're going to start off with one of the OGs of Irish Breakdown, Notre Dame 2164, my guy. And he asks, so Peter Jones, and Anthonie Knapp both project to be interior guys. Correct, if that is the case, and we have a 4-man O-line class. Our next 2 O-linemen have to be pure tackles, right? And so he brought this question up, but I wanted to kind of get it again because not everybody was in the chat. We had our number of people in the reason I'm bringing this up, Ryan, the number when we were breaking down Anthonie Knapp of people that were in the show is a lot lower than it is now. We've had a lot of people join. So I did want to bring this up so you could address it because I know there's some people that missed that part of the breakdown. They're going to have the same exact question about Anthonie Knapp. So I wanted to give you a chance to speak on that again in the mailbag. And
it's a great question, right? It's one that we have had conversations about even before Anthonie, went public with the conversation, right? Is that as of right now, from sources that we're hearing, right, is that it's not necessarily a given that Anthonie Knapp is a guard at the next level or an interior player at the next level. He might have a shot at offensive tackle. Peter Jones is the same way, though. I want people to understand that. I think that Peter Jones is a better guard potentially than tackle. There's no doubt about it. But I also believe that Notre Dame may have intentions of giving him a shot at tackle. Like that's possible, right? So that could change the formula a little bit for this question. But regardless, I would still take 2 offensive tackle types. I personally would.
I would take 4. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, look, I'm a big fan of that. I like guys that play, even if they're not necessarily for sure tackles in college.
Yep.
I like tackles. I think that's the kind of, you usually get a little bit longer guys. You get more powerful guys. To me, this is Peter Jones.
Yep.
Peter Jones is a top 250 caliber offensive tackle. Is that fair? He's a top 150 caliber guard. The point being, he's good at both. He could play both. It's just his ceiling is higher and floor is higher at guard than it is tackle, in my opinion. That's our opinion. Yep. I don't know if that's Notre Dame's opinion. But the fact that he can grade out as a top 250 guy at both, Ryan, to me is a reason why you like Peter Jones. Generally speaking, people should like Peter Jones because he brings a lot of positional flexibility. He can play 3 positions in the Notre Dame offense, right tackle and both guards.
Yep.
And that's where you want to be. You don't want guys that are pigeonholed into one. You don't want a guy that only can play center or only can play right tackle because he can't play left-handed anywhere. That's not a great way to put a 5-man group together.
Agreed.
And so that's one thing I like about both of these kids, to be completely honest with you.
Well, I mean, there's a possibility that I don't think it's outrageous to say that Anthonie Knapp could potentially play 4 different positions at Notre Dame. I mean, he can play center, he can play both guards, and might be able to play tackle, right? Like one of the tackle spots. So it's going to be interesting, man. But I mean, that's kind of where we are right now, is that those guys are probably going to have the opportunity to play tackle at Notre Dame, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But regardless, still targeting guys that can play offensive tackle at the next level. Like Gerby Lambert is a guy that I would look at tremendously. And then Caleb Brewer would be the other guy personally that I would take a deep look at. But then you also still have guys like Andrew Sprague on the board, Kevin Haywood, who are more offensive tackle types than interior players.
Yep. Good stuff. Here we go. John Mayernich, Ryan.
John's question, hypothetically, would Notre Dame take all 5 of Carson Hobbs, Leonard Moore, Aaron Scott, Caleb Beasley, and John Mitchell? I feel a few could play safety as well if need be.
It would depend on the order in which those guys committed. I won't tell you what that order is, but I think it would depend on the order. For example, I'll give you one little one. If they have 4 of those 5 guys committed and Caleb Beasley decides he wants to come to Notre Dame, they'd take him.
They take him, yeah.
Honestly, I think John Mitchell's the only John Mitchell's actually, he could play receiver. All 5 of those kids can play another. Aaron Scott is a Division I wide receiver.
Yes.
He's just a potential Division I star at cornerback. Like if Aaron Scott was like, hey, I want to play receiver, you'd be like, all right, cool. We'll give you a shot. You're a pretty good football player. And John Mitchell would be a pretty good slot, in my opinion. I don't think he's as good there as he is in the secondary. That's my only thing. I think he has a chance to be a really good field or nickel corner, both, not just a nickel corner. He brings a lot of ability to the table on both, but he could play receiver if you needed him to. He can return kicks. To me, I think Leonard Moore could play safety. I definitely think Carson Hobbs could play safety. And I think Caleb Beasley could play safety as like a cover. Like Caleb Beasley could be a bigger version in college of what Julian Love is in the NFL, right? A cover safety, but he's bigger than Julian Love was by at least 2 inches taller than Julian Love was. So I would personally be okay with that. I just think the odds of it happening are incredibly slim.
It gets hard to sell. It would be hard at that point to sell all 5 of those guys of like, hey man, like, this is our plan for you type of thing. Right. But I mean, Brian, we've talked about this though. I mean, I think back to when Coach Freeman when Coach Freeman coached at Cincinnati, they were basically positionless in the back end at the secondary, right? Like they had guys that could just play man coverage all over the board, like the Orquan Bushes of the world and the Brian Cooks were guys that could move inside and could just cover man-to-man. On most teams, Orquan Bush is a starting outside corner, but you had Ahmad Gardner and Kobe Bryant, so it's like, dude, just move inside. You're there, right? And I think that is an interesting opportunity if it does happen.
I love that they're doing that. They're just recruiting guys that can cover and just, can you cover? I mean, that's a big, big thing.
Yep.
Big thing. Let's get to some really good questions today, Ryan. We did have a super chat from Sean. He had left a $99 super chat and he wanted to send it to the show. So I will actually retroactively add this to yesterday's total, Sean.
Nice.
So I appreciate that very much. We'll definitely get that rocking and rolling. So I appreciate you doing that and appreciate your support along with everybody else that gave. And there's a lot of people, like we had 63, now 64 individual super chat donations between the 2 shows yesterday. But there was also a lot of people who didn't give super chats yesterday, Ryan, that just went out and just gave directly to the organization. So we had a lot of people step up. And it's just one of those things, Ryan, where I just love being a part of this community. I really do. There's so many great people here, man. Whenever somebody needs prayer, you just see the responses in the chat. Whenever someone's struggling with something, you see responses. Whenever somebody has a kid, just the outpouring of excitement. Y'all are awesome. I love this community. Love this community. Quinn Kibler, Ryan, here we go. Here's one.
Quinn says, Brian, you ready for the Red season?
Heck no. I could not care less about the Cincinnati Reds anymore.
They're bad right now, right? Like they're bad.
Terrible.
Aren't they?
I saw somebody sent me something the other day. Ken Griffey Jr. will be the 4th highest paid player on the Reds this year because he's still getting money from he's getting like $3-something million a year, and he's supposedly going to be like the 4th highest paid guy the Reds are going to have this year. That's so embarrassing. Like it's a joke. That I don't have a lot of love for the Reds ownership right now. I really don't. So I'm like, look, I don't like watching junk. If you don't care about your product, why should I? I don't have a lot of free time. I'm not going to spend it on watching an organization that just doesn't care about putting a good product on the field. So I got more important things to do with my time than to watch the Reds. When they start caring again about putting a good product out, like if I was writing articles and just writing gibberish and just writing just the dumbest things like he play quarterback, start like Bam Bam or something like that from the Flintstones or something. Would y'all read it? No, like this is garbage. I'm not going to take my time out of my day to read this stuff. Right. And that's how I feel about the Reds. So I just
they're definitely not. They're definitely not the big red machine anymore. That's for sure.
I mean, they're not even the good teams that they had 10 years ago. I mean, where they were getting to the playoffs. I mean, they're getting knocked out in the first round, but I mean, whatever. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I do not care. Ryan, are you a Phillies fan?
Phillies fan. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Oh.
I went through a little bit of a weird baseball thing there. I was a big baseball fan growing up, and then the Phillies didn't make the playoffs for like a decade. So I was just like, wow, I don't care about this anymore. But thankfully, the Phillies are a lot better now. They made the World Series, even though they lost this past year, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. The Phillies were a really good team when I was a really little kid, because when I was young and my first sport I fell in love with as a kid was baseball, because my dad's a big baseball guy. My dad was a big Red Machine guy. So, I mean, I've actually seen Tony Perez and Pete Rose play in person. Now, they were old when I saw them play, but I saw them play. And so, I mean, I was going to games like young as a kid, like young. And so, my dad still felt bad about how Pete left to go to the Phillies, because Pete Rose played for the Phillies and won a World Series with the Phillies with Mike Schmidt. But I remember watching Mike Schmidt up as a kid, and watching those Philly teams. So they were really good. I missed those old uniforms. I'm not gonna lie to you. When they wear those as a throwback, I love it. The light blue with the maroon or whatever. Those are great throwback uniforms.
Oh man, those teams were crazy with Larry Boa and Mike Schmidt and Steve Carlton as their pitcher. And they were incredible. Yeah. They were incredible. Well, my dad's favorite baseball player of all time is actually Johnny Bench, for a little bit of Reds conversation there. So
there you go. Yeah. My dad was a Yankees fan as a kid in Virginia, but when he moved to Ohio, he immediately fell in love with the Big Red Machine, man. Immediately fell in love with him. And some people in this chat really know how to hurt me, man. Just really know how to make me feel bad. Bailey Brad said Ryan Howard was my favorite player growing up. When you're talking about here's the funny thing, because you'll probably say the same thing. When you're talking about Ryan Howard was your player growing up, meaning like when you were a kid, Ryan Howard was the guy I watched in my 30s.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, so Bailey Brad, you know how to hurt me, man. You know how to hurt me.
Ken Griffey Jr. was probably my favorite player growing up, man. I love Ken Griffey Jr.
My first favorite player was Dave Concepcion. I loved Dave Concepcion. He was a shortstop. So my first T-ball number was 13. I loved Dave Concepcion. Then when he was replaced by Barry Larkin became my first favorite player. Then Griffey was my favorite non-Reds player. And of course, he eventually played for the Reds. So, Barry Larkin was my dude after Dave Concepcion retired. And that was like that transition at shortstop. You went from, it was either going to be Larkin or Kurt Treadwell. And obviously Larkin was that guy. But, I loved watching Barry Larkin play, man.
First video game I ever had was the Ken Griffey Jr. baseball game on Nintendo, dude. It was great. It was so fantastic.
My favorite baseball game, I'm trying to remember, Baseball Stars. My dad and I would play this because you'd have like different teams, and like there was like a ninja team, but like one of the teams was like the old, like you had Babe Ruth on it, Lou Gehrig. Baseball Stars was awesome. And then RBI baseball, obviously growing up, was a pretty cool deal too. So your version of baseball games is a little bit cleaner than the ones I played with growing up as a kid. So, I used to love baseball, man. Honestly, I stopped liking it even before the Reds started stinking, because I just don't enjoy what it had become. I don't enjoy the whole, everyone hits a home run, walks or strikes out. You don't hit and run anymore. You don't bunt anymore. You don't steal bases anymore. I mean, I don't like the game. And now with the
they took the shift away, and
this pitch clock stuff, I hate. Like if I go to a baseball game, I don't want it to. The whole reason I love going to baseball games is it's chill. It's just I get to relax. I can talk to someone in between pitches. Now it's just like, okay, this silly stuff where you're getting called a ball or strike and you're not even throwing it. It's just like, man, I just can't stand it. I cannot stand the pitch clock and all this stuff. It's just like you've got a guy running you're trying to, this has always failed. You're trying to appeal to a community that will never fully dive into what you're doing. And all you're doing is turning off the people who do support your sport, in my opinion, or because some people are going to like it. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And all the people I have yet to meet anyone over 30 that thinks the pitch clock is a good idea. I just don't. I don't.
I haven't talked to anybody yet that thinks it's a good idea. Like it's
I just
my dad hates it too.
So you've lost a guy that grew up. I mean, we used to play baseball games with dice. Did you ever do that when you were a kid, Ryan?
No.
So you'd have you'd take your baseball cards and you'd have your team. And so you take 2 dice and 2 6s was a grand slam. 6, you get some combination of 6, is like a single, 7 is a fly out. Like, and just roll your dice. And it's like you have some are out, some are hits. And, Snake Eyes was like I can't remember what that one was, but there was just different things where, that's what I grew up, man. I loved baseball. I would sit there and listen to Reds games. I'd listen to Marty Brenneman and Joe Nuxall do play-by-plays, and I'd have my 3-ring binder with my loose leaf paper in it, and I'm literally keeping the box score, and I'm tabulating their stats throughout the season because you didn't always have that. The paper would have it, at the end of the week, but that's how much I love baseball, and they've completely turned me off. In the last 3 years, I don't think I've watched a single game of baseball. And I was thinking, I'm going to get back to baseball. I may find a new team, but I'm going to get back to baseball. And then they did all this crap with the pitch clock. I'm like, I'm good. I'm hard pass. I'm done. But hey, I know attracting some millennial that's going to watch you for 5 minutes and then get bored and go do something else. Good luck with that.
I know some people like that the shift is gone now, but I kind of hated that personally because I was part of that's part of the strategy in baseball. But see, being able to hit away and
right. Yeah. You grew up with the shift. My whole thing with the shift is, here's a thought: teach freaking hitters how to hit the opposite direction.
That's what I'm saying. You're losing the fundamentals now. It's just exactly
right. But I mean, I get. I don't mind them getting rid of the shift. I mean, I think it's silly, but it's because I didn't grow up with the shift. The shift became a thing. I mean, the shift's been around for a long time, but it became prominent when I was older. You kind of grew up a little bit more with that. So I think that's kind of why I didn't like it. It's because with anything, I'm a traditionalist. I thought baseball was a great game in the 80s and 90s. I mean, hit and runs. People are like, well, I don't want to watch some boring 1-0. I'm sorry. One of the greatest games I ever watched as a child was John Smoltz versus Jack Morris in the World Series. I think it was like a 1-0 game.
You want to hear a funny story about that?
Yeah, sure.
That was in the World Series. That was actually the night I was born. My dad was watching that game, but when Jack Morris was a no-hitter.
Thank you for making me really freaking old because I remember watching that game and you were being birthed.
My dad was literally watching the no-hitter in the room while my mother was giving birth.
Funny.
So
that's really funny. Yeah, way to make me feel really old, Ryan.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
If you can't appreciate that type of game, and I don't think you understand baseball. And I have no use for that, to be completely honest with you. So I'm done. I'm done with baseball, to be honest with you. So I have more important things to do in my time than watch that nonsense. Here's a question, Ryan, from Nathan Milton. I'll actually ask this one, let you answer it, Ryan. Nathan asks, what is the ideal tackle sizes, and what is the shortest tackle size you'd be comfortable with?
Nathan, this is a lot different than an NFL conversation, right? So NFL, you want at least 6'4". You want 33.5 plus inch arms. 34 is the desired threshold, though, for an NFL offensive tackle. But you can pass with 33.5. Some people have dropped the threshold down to 33 because guys like Rashawn Slater and Penei Sewell have come in recently, and they're just barely over 33 inches. I think Rashawn was actually at exactly 33 inches. So that's kind of the desired threshold from a NFL perspective. I mean, ideally, you want 6'5 plus, though, but you can pass with 6'4 as long as you have the desired length. College, it's a little different, man. A college football player doesn't necessarily have to be a great NFL player, right? So maybe they don't project as an offensive tackle to the next level. But Liam Eichenberg had 32 and some odd inch arms, and he was a really good left tackle in the NFL.
Zach Martin wasn't much longer than him, and he was an elite left tackle as well.
Exactly. So I think it's very situational, right? Like at Notre Dame, I still think you want to shoot for 33-inch arm length. Like that would still be great, but there are going to be some exceptions. Like if there's a guy that's technically advanced or has really good foot quickness that can overcompensate for the lack of length, sure. But like ideally, you still want a guy that's 6'4.5" plus, 33+ inch arms on the college level. Like that is ideal, but it's not always a deal breaker on the college level. Not always a deal breaker.
And there's always the exceptions to the rule. Isaiah Wynn, who's 6'2", is an exception to a rule. I don't care as much about height, Ryan, as I do length, to your point. And can you play long? Zach Martin could play long because he was so fundamentally sound. He could play. Yeah. He could get away with things that another guy couldn't.
Yep.
So yeah, I think 6'4" is ideal. Minimum 6'4" is ideal.
Yes.
Give me at least 33-inch arms, at least. Yep. But what's the shortest tackle size I'd be comfortable with? I think you nailed it, Ryan. Depends on the player. Because at the end of the day, I care more about can you get the job done at a high level than I care about do you have the measurables. And then you have that weird unicorn like Liam Eichen or like Josh Lugg who has all the size you want in a tackle, except his arm length is like little tiny midget, like
he's a
guard
he's
arms.
A T-Rex.
He's a
T-Rex. Yeah.
Yeah. I still love that kid though. He's a really good kid. Josh is one of the favorite kids I've covered. Just a really, really nice young man. Really like that kid. Really
all through adversity, man. Through a lot of adversity. So I always respect those type of kids.
Yep, absolutely. And we got a question from John Murray.
John's question. Good day, IB. Good day, John. Great day to be Irish. Yes, it is.
Agree. Literally, I'm Irish every day, but today's one of those great ones. Yes.
Mailbag. Is Ryan Barnes still on the team? If so, at cornerback or safety?
He is still on the team, and he is a corner. Could he move to safety? Sure. I just think right now they're just trying to get him comfortable at corner. If there's going to be a move it to safety, I still will say, and I will take this to my grave, it needs to be Clarence Lewis. But I just don't know if that's going to happen right now.
Yeah. From Peter Connolly, any concern about Justin Scott's quickness? Nope. I don't have any concerns of Justin Scott's quickness.
I mean, again, for what you're asking him to do, no, Justin Scott's plenty athletic, in my opinion.
I also think that I don't think that Justin Scott is technically advanced as a football player. So, I think, honestly, Peter, for, truly answering the question, I don't think there's a stiffness to Justin Scott for the position he plays or anything. I don't think there's a bad change of direction. I just think sometimes he plays a little bit high because he's just not the most technically refined kid of all time. But I have no question about Justin Scott from a physical perspective, man. He's 6'4 plus, he's 300 plus pounds, has good length, he's explosive for the position. So no, I don't have any concerns. I just think it's more about the technical refinements that will make him look a little more quicker, right? A little quicker.
Yep, absolutely. Let's get to some more.
From Brandon Plesner. Knapp said when he got his first Division I offer, he was 212 pounds. He's now 268 pounds. Do you have concerns about him being able to add even more weight to his frame in order to play at the next level?
I don't, because of the way he looks at 268 pounds. He looks thin. I mean, he does look he does. Well, I shouldn't say thin. He looks. I mean, he's got good shoulder width, I think. And if his arm length is what they say it is, I'll say this: if looking at his film, and this is why do you have the combine? The film doesn't lie. This is exactly why you have combines. Because I don't know about this guy's length. He seems to get the job done, but I mean, is it going to project to the next level? Because I can see a guy in college with 31.5-inch arms and say, this guy gets the job done. But I know for a fact when he gets the NFL and he's playing against the best of the best, he's not going to be able to play tackle with 31.5-inch arms, most likely. Those guys are unicorns. So I need to know that. So I watch a kid, I'm saying, well, he doesn't look like he has real long arms, but he's getting the job done. I mean, you watch the film and you're like, he's a handsy player. I mean, but then you say, okay, 34-inch arms. All right, cool. That checks the box for me. And so when I look at, and that also to me, if that's what his arms are, that makes me think his shoulders are a little bit wider than maybe I thought watching far away film coming in. So, but he doesn't have bad weight. He doesn't look stiff. Here's where you get concerned about a kid who makes a big weight jump. Does he look tight? Or does he have bad weight in his core? Because a kid, if a kid makes a 40-pound jump in weight and you can notice it in his midsection, that's a problem. Now, if you see his booty gets bigger, and I'm not trying to be strange, but that's where a good weight is going to come from. If you're really good at squats and doing all those things, your butt area down to your thigh is going to get thick. And that's where you want a guy to be. Your calves are going to get bigger. Your chest is going to get out. So, for example, we've seen pictures of Sam Pendleton. And there's some pictures of Sam Pendleton during one of his visits where he's got like a striped shirt on, and he's doing like this fun, thing with Sylvan Absher and Monroe Freeling. And you can see, even with the shirt untucked, you can still see Sylvan Absher has he's got a gut, right? And so you can see it. My wife and I love watching Kung Fu Panda together. We watched it a week or two ago, and there's a scene in there where he's like, it's sensitive in the flabby parts, right? Like Sam had a lot of flabby parts. And then I interviewed him a couple weeks back when we had a chance to sit down with the freshman. And I said to him, I said, dude, you do not look the same. Like, you look different. You could see it. Like, his gut was smaller. His chest was out. You could see like he was filling out his pants a little bit more, like, because you're sizing these guys up. And you can see his like shoulders were a little thicker. His lats were getting bigger. Looked like a completely different guy. He'd reshaped himself that quickly. We have a little intel about Sam Pendleton on our board, by the way, as well. And so when you see a guy put weight on and he's kind of growing in those areas, you say, okay, this is good. This guy's going to be able to maintain that. You don't want to see the bad weight put on the hips, like the love handle area, the stomach. You don't want to see the chest kind of getting puffy. You want to see it defined. And when I look at Anthonie Knapp, from what I've seen so far, I don't see those things that would cause me to have red flags. We saw that from Joe Alt. As Joe Alt went from like 240 to 260 to 270, 280, he was just filling out naturally. It wasn't like he pushed a bunch of bad weight on to make weight. And I think that's the thing that makes me feel he can at least get to 280, 285, no problem. The question I then have is, okay, can he get past that and maintain his quickness and athleticism? That's the question. And so we'll find out if he can do that. And that's a question for every kid that shows up 260 or 265,
Yeah.
But again, he's still a junior though. He's further along frame wise right now than what Emil Wagner was as a junior. Yeah. I'll say that. So I'm not overly concerned about it. It's just, the weight will get there. With Emil, I don't know if the weight will get there. Right? I mean, if he's got the way to naturally get to that weight. With Knapp, I have no problem. The question is, can he maintain his athleticism to get there? That's going to be a different question.
It's a great question.
All right, here's the next question that we have here, Ryan. This is a good one here from Archer, our resident Ohio State fan, Archer452.
His question is, what Notre Dame football all-time record holder is the most surprising? That's an interesting question.
To me, it's Autry Denson.
Yeah, Archer's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about all the great running backs at Notre Dame, Vegas Ferguson, Alan Pinkett, Jerome Bettis, Reggie Brooks. You say, wait a minute, hold on. Autry Denson's the all-time leading rusher? Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
I think someone put in the chat that Jerome Bettis isn't even top 10 all time, I think, at Notre Dame or something like that, which is pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
So
I love when people tell us that because we don't like something, we don't understand it. Don't you just love that? Like, no, I understand it. I just don't like it, so I'm choosing not to watch it. I always find that hilarious when people say, well, no, you don't understand. I understand just fine. Doesn't mean I like it.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's a comment in the chat about Brian doesn't understand how baseball has evolved. Yes, I do. It's evolved, and I don't like it. Just like basketball has evolved. I know exactly what basketball is now. I just don't like it. I don't like NBA. I don't like the fact that they shoot 87 million three-pointers a year. I get it. It's evolved. I don't like it. Right? I don't like that they don't have traditional bigs anymore. That's the version of basketball I like. So you got to evolve. No, I don't. I like what I like. And if it's someone I like, I choose to watch something else. Right? I was asked about baseball. Right? So I understand it just fine. I just don't like it. It's not that hard. I played baseball my whole life. Trust me, I understand how baseball works. Okay? It's just, I don't like it. I like it played this way. It's not being played that way. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. It has nothing to do with understanding. And right?
You're entitled to like what you like and not like what you don't like. So.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I always find that comical. There was another question. Here's a follow-up from Archer, Ryan, that I thought was interesting. Yep. This is a good question.
This question is, which Notre Dame record feels more unbreakable? Brady Quinn's 11,762 yards and 95 touchdowns, or Autry Denson's 4,318 yards? I think it's Autry Denson's, right? I mean,
okay, state your case. I'm very curious why you have this feeling.
It's a passing era. So if you get a quarterback that comes in and let's say he's a redshirt freshman and he starts for 3 years and he's a good football player, he's going to be close to those numbers. Like he's going to be close. The Audrey Denson number, Brian, that's 1,000 yards per year for a running back in a position that doesn't typically play 4 years, right? Like that's kind of if a running back has run for 3,000 something yards after 3 seasons, he's probably going to the NFL, right? Like he's most likely going to the NFL. So I think it's just more the passing era. And like when you're talking about, that's like a longevity thing, right? Audrey Denson got that because he played 4 years at Notre Dame. Yeah. Like that's why he got that number.
The only way that Audrey Denson's record gets broken, there's 2 ways, in my opinion. Number one is you have a guy that comes in and starts as a true freshman and is a stud.
Yeah.
Like stud, 1,500-yard freshman season, because you're on the right path, Ryan, and we're on the same page. I pick Audrey Denson's record because if a guy stays 4 years and he starts as a freshman, Ryan, he only needs to average 1,079.5 yards to get to where Audrey was. That's it. It's not that hard, because you got to think he may only have like 600 as a freshman, and then he'll add more onto that after that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the problem is, as you stated, it's running backs don't stay long enough, and they just don't. I mean, I honestly thought I had, matter of fact, right? I had no doubt in my mind that Josh Adams was going to break Audrey Denson's record. I had no doubt because he set the freshman record. I think he was like 3rd all time in total yards after his 2nd season. He had over 1,700 yards after 2 years, and then he comes out and rushes for 1,400 yards. He had 3,200 yards. We needed 1,100 some yards next year. There's no way Josh Adams is going to go pro. He's not going to get drafted that high. But guess what? He went pro. Drafted. Right, and didn't get drafted. So running backs just they get bad advice. And they just don't stay that long. I mean, a guy staying 4 years as 1,000-yard rusher, for at least 2 of those years, it just doesn't happen anymore. Whereas a quarterback, so if a guy is going to be, so that's why I say it's got to be a stud, because to break Audrey's record in basically 3 years, and he has to play as a true freshman, because if he doesn't play as a freshman and he redshirts his redshirt freshman year and redshirt sophomore year, he's over 1,000 yards, he's gone. Kyron Williams, perfect example. This is why I was so dumb to redshirt Kyron. It's like Tony Jones didn't even stay for 5 years. If there was ever a 5-year back at Notre Dame, it was Tony Jones Jr. And he didn't stay for 5 years. Yep. And that's not a knock on Tony. It's just like he's just not that dynamic guy that you're like, hey, he didn't like take a ton of carries in his career. You thought, he's going to stay. And he didn't. And Kyron didn't. Kyron didn't stay for a senior year. So a guy's going to have to average, the number I have here, Ryan, is 1,439 yards a year for 3 years to pass Audrey's record. It's a lot of yards. Yeah. A quarterback but there's a greater chance that a guy stays for 4 years at quarterback. So let's say that you have a guy that stays for 4 years. You only need to pass for 29.41 a year, on average, right? Yep. Which means, let's say a kid, Ryan, comes in as a freshman and he throws for 500 yards in mop-up duty. And then he plays the next 3 years. He only has to average 37.50 basically to break Brady's record, a little over 37.50. That's very doable. Yep. Very doable. But like a lot of other positions, that's going to be a little harder to do in 4 years. So most likely you hope that a guy can come in and be a 3-year starter. But if a guy's a 3-year starter, right, he only has to average 3,921 yards a year. Now that's a lot, but that's very doable in today's era.
It's capable. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's certainly possible.
Even to your running back conversation, Brian, Darius Walker was another guy who left early, right? And you're just like, Darius is a good player, man. Like he ran for 1,000 yards back-to-back years. I mean, maybe he had a shot at doing it if he would have went back, but running backs just don't do that, man. Like just don't do it. And it's more of a committee approach, what someone said in the chat, which I agree. I mean, you had 2 running backs last year that ran for 800 and 900 yards. That's going to take some yardage away from one and give it to the other. And it's like that share concept. So it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be it really is going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And he said J.K. Dobbins had 44.59 yards in 3 years. Yeah, like I said, a stud. That's kind of exactly what I said. Unless a guy's a dude that comes in and plays right away. Well, what did J.K. Dobbins do in his career at Notre Dame? He came in and played right away and had a 2,000-yard season. That just doesn't happen at Notre Dame. It's a different type of offense, as you mentioned. J.K. Dobbins rushed for 1,400 yards as a true freshman. Dude, that's exactly what I'm saying. Wild. You got to come in as a true freshman and be a dude. That's what I'm telling you.
I hope he can stay healthy, man. He's had the injury bug early in his
Really in the
Ravens
NFL?
career.
That's a bummer.
Really good as a rookie. Then he got hurt his second year, and then third year, like he came back at some point, but he still looked kind of banged up. Like I hope he's able to stay healthy, man, because he's really good if he can.
Yeah. Yeah, oof, man. I thought one of the mistakes Ohio State made in the playoff game against Clemson in 19 was they went away from JK in the second half.
Yeah.
That's one of the mistakes I thought that they made in that particular game. Let's get to some more questions here, Mr. Roberts. Here's one. I'll read this, Ryan, because this is for you, so I'll set you up for this one. And Benjamin McCarthy says, Ryan, I'm really interested to get your take on who will be drafted first in the NFL draft and who you take regardless of the team picking. So this is kind of twofold, Ryan. Who do you think will get taken based on what you know and what you've been told and all that, and then who you would take with the number one overall pick? Basically, who's the best player in the draft is the second question.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, Carolina's in a situation that you traded up to get a quarterback, right? So, I mean, that's where the piece is going to come from. I believe Benjamin just kind of tea leaves and just understanding of things. Yeah, I think it's going to be one of C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. Like, I think that those are the guys that are going to demand that first overall selection. The media and everybody has kind of convinced themselves due to Josh McCown making a YouTube video and being at a pro day that it's definitely CJ Stroud. I'm not all the way there on it yet. I'm not, because we see that deception happen every single year. Like it's hard to read sometimes, but I think it's going to be CJ or Bryce. I would pick Bryce personally. I would. I've been on board on that one. I think that if you are comfortable with the height and the size profile, and it's a talking point for sure, and it will always be one, then I think that he is the better overall football player in this draft. So quarterback position, I would take Bryce over CJ, but regardless, I think it's going to be CJ or Bryce. And honestly, man, I think both could be very good quarterbacks in the NFL. So I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer. It's about preference at that point.
Yeah. So did you answer who the best is?
I think Bryce would be
you
my
think
selection.
Bryce is?
Yeah.
Like, do you think he is
the overall player in the class?
That's
that
was going to be my question. Yeah.
Best overall player in the class, regardless of off the field stuff, in my opinion, is Jalen Carter. I think he is the best player in this class out of Georgia. I think Will Anderson's a very close second. I think those are the two blue chip kids.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So if you took positional value, because like you said, I think your point is right on. Like I'd probably take Bryce, because you're adding positional value of a quarterback. I get that. It makes total sense. I just was curious who your top guy. Like if you're just doing a board of, hey, here's the 50 best guys, who would be your number one?
It would be Jalen, because I mean, again, Jalen's got the off the field stuff that he still has to answer and whatnot. But I just think he's the most rare football player that's in this class right now. I mean, Will Anderson's exceptional, right? But he still has some things that you have questions on, as far as he's not the biggest edge of the world. He still needs to be a little bit more nuanced as a pass rusher, but he's very, very good. There's no doubt. Jalen Carter is a dude that's like 4-man front, 3-man front. I don't care, man. Just put him out there and just let him eat. Like that's just all he has to do. Like he's just such a good football player, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I just laugh at the stuff about the kid from Texas Tech being better than Will Anderson. It's just like you guys are gonna like talk yourself into a dumb decision, in my opinion.
I'm telling you right now, and I've been saying this on podcasts recently, Brian, over the last couple of weeks. Just don't be shocked, and this is for everyone out there. Don't be shocked if Tyree Wilson's the first defensive player off the board. Yeah. Just don't be shocked when it happens. Don't be shocked.
Because people are going to talk themselves into something dumb, in my opinion.
Right. And he fits the profile. He's got long arms and blah, blah, blah.
The worst thing that Will Anderson ever did was have a season like he had in 2021 when he wasn't draft eligible. That's the worst thing he could have done, because there was no way he's going to live up to that. Like he had a down year with 17 tackles for loss and 10 sacks and 12 quarterback hurries.
So wild, man.
That's his down year. But I'm supposed to believe a dude that never had more than 7.5 sacks in a season is better than Will Anderson.
Yep.
Come on, man.
All I have to say is that production isn't everything when you evaluate to the NFL, but a guy that just had 34. Well, it matters, right? That's my point. Is the guy had 34 sacks at Alabama in the SEC in 3 seasons. Like, that matters, man. That matters. He was a dude from the second he stepped on campus, and that matters.
Yep. It is what it is, man. Here's one from Coach Koch. Thank you, Coach.
Coach says, love the football team showing up for the lacrosse game. Lots of good crossover with those sports. Do y'all follow Notre Dame lacrosse? Wonderful sport, and you should give it a chance.
I have thought about that a lot, Ryan. I have watched very little lacrosse. I have to admit, I had a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth about lacrosse because the school I went to, that I transferred to my second year, Salisbury University, was a big lacrosse school, and I just didn't get along very well with the lacrosse players. They were just kind of
Jerks.
preppy and just kind of douchey and just not my favorite people, to be completely honest with you.
Get that.
And just like, yeah, hard pass. So I just never watched it. But as I've watched it the last few years, because you're seeing more and more football players that play lacrosse.
A lot more. Yeah.
I'm watching Nolan Ziegler play lacrosse because I'm trying to evaluate him athletically. I'm like, dude, this is a sport. I have respect for how this sport is played. Like the hand-eye coordination you need to have to play that sport at a high level is outstanding. You know, it's a physical sport. You know, I mean, you're wearing pads, right,
Yes.
for a reason. You know, it's you got to be athletic. You got to be in great shape. I have a lot of respect for lacrosse as a sport. I just, like I said, I had reasons why I chose not to watch it. But as I've watched a couple Notre Dame games in recent years in lacrosse, I'm like, this is an intense sport, man. Like,
yeah.
I tried playing catch once with my nephew. Was it him? Might have been somebody else. And I'm like, yo, I'm not very good at this. This is like this takes skill. I'm like, how do you guys do this? I'm like, this ball's going all over the place. I'm trying to throw it straight here and it goes like 75 feet that way. It's like, yeah, this is not easy. So it's a sport I have a lot of respect for. Will I ever kind of follow it? I doubt it. I mean, it's kind of like hockey. I have a great deal of respect for hockey as a sport. I mean, the skill that you have to play the game of hockey is really tremendous. I just don't know enough about it and just don't learn it. You know, maybe I should, but I don't have the time to, because I don't want to watch something I don't know what's happening. You know, like, okay, ball in net, yay! But I need to understand what's happening to really enjoy it, and I haven't taken the time to do that. But it's a sport that, what little I know, right, I have a lot of respect for.
I was very oblivious to lacrosse because my high school team did not have a boys lacrosse team, so like I wasn't around it much. Like the girls had a lacrosse team, but like I never really watched it, gave it much of a chance, to be honest. I agree, though. I think that there's a lot of things that are applicable to being a multi-sport guy or multi-sport person in lacrosse, but I didn't have enough information about it when I was younger to like grow up with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I never heard of lacrosse as a kid growing up in Ohio. We didn't have lacrosse in Northwest Ohio that I knew of. And then when I went to Virginia Beach, it was only the private schools had it. It wasn't and I went to a public school my first 2 years. And then when I went to a private school my last 2 years, it was like a really it's grown now. Like my nieces and nephew go there now and it's got like a building. But we went to classes in portables. It was a sport. You went there because you either went to the local church, or you were an athlete. Those are the two people went there. And I went there because I was an athlete, right? So we're going to school in portables, yet our basketball team is like beating Mount Zion and taking Oak Hill down to the wire. You know what I mean? Like, you know, our two bigs were both multi-year starters at NC State, you know, Damon Thornton and Kenny Inge. So I was there to play sports. And so it was like Norfolk Academy, Norfolk Collegiate, like those really preppy kids that like were not people that I would want to hang out with, play lacrosse. And then it was the same way in college. But I think it's changing now. I think you're seeing it becoming a more popular sport. But it's still one of those ones that it's just the thing about baseball and the thing about basketball and football, Ryan, is as a kid, it's cheap to play.
Yes.
Like not playing the sport like on a team, but like just growing up playing a football, just give me one little tiny, you know, I'd get like a Denver Bronco football for Christmas. It's like this big. And it's like, well, got a new football for street ball. Same with basketball. Just give me a ball and a hoop. And there's hoops everywhere. You know, baseball, I mean, yeah, but you just play stickball, play wiffle ball. It's cheap. Like you could play some version of baseball growing up as a kid. Now, if you wanted to play like on a team, that got a little expensive. Sure. But like lacrosse, like that's, I mean, just some dude's got a ball and you can all play. Man. Hockey's another one. That's another one.
Very expensive. Yeah.
Like soccer, just give me a ball in a big field. I can play it. You know, like you can put two sticks in the ground for this is where the goals are. You know what I mean? Like that, you know, so growing up where I grew up, those are the sports we played, you know. And I also like sports you can kind of play by yourself. So like baseball, you can get a net and hit into the net, you know. Basketball, I can just go out there and I've had 5-on-5 games by myself growing up as a kid. Like, you know, Emil Robinson passes to Glenn Rice, who throws the alley-oop to Loy Vaughn, you can play by yourself. You can't do that really with football. Tackle yourself. Parents have you. He needs to see somebody. I think that kid's like fallen on his head a few too many times. So here we go. Father David Penny, Ryan, has a recruiting question here.
Question is, are we expecting another visit from Justin Scott in the near future? Maybe the Blue Gold game?
I believe that's being worked on. So whether that's going to happen or not, I believe that's being worked on. It's one of those ones where I think Justin has talked about doing it, but him talking about doing it and then actually getting down here for that is a different thing. So,
Sure.
But I do believe it's being worked on.
And if it does happen, that's massive for that recruitment. Absolutely massive.
We have a super chat from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you, Charlie, very much for the super chat.
And he said Ryan is correct with growth spurts. Thank you. Dennis Rodman went from 5'11" to 6'7" between 19 and 20 years old. You never know how crazy genetics can play out. Go IB.
Yeah. I see that all the time. Like I've said, you see, that's what, like when you see a guy that goes to Northern Iowa, right? Trevor Penning. What was Trevor Penning weighing when he was coming out of high school, Ryan? Do you have any idea?
He actually was a little bigger, but Spencer Brown, who was a third-round pick the year before, he was 6'8" and 220 pounds.
That's the kid that I was thinking of because I had heard that story going into the draft of the Northern Iowa kid. So it was Spencer Brown, not Trevor Penning. But it's not that teams missed on him. He just wasn't that guy at that age. And you see these growth spurts more because, like you mentioned Dennis Rodman, right? But that's a taller guy. The guy's going to grow that way. I had a cousin, my cousin David was like maybe 5. I think I was told, I was too young. He always looked tall to me, but that's because he's like a decade older than me. But he had a big growth spurt, like this is junior, senior year of high school. Like after his junior, senior high school, he grew to like 6'3" or whatever. Yeah. That stuff happens, and kids fill out differently. Joe Walt's a monster now, but as a junior in high school, he was like, what, 250 pounds?
Yeah. Kyle Hamilton had a crazy growth spurt too, right? Didn't Kyle Hamilton have
sophomore?
One crazy?
Yeah, like 2 or 3 inches as like a freshman or sophomore. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But you'll see that stuff. No, you're right, Charlie. And especially, but that's why you see these guys that are unranked coming out of high school and because they're like, oh, they're 240 pounds, right? Like I think I saw somewhere the kid that went to Iowa. I'm gonna look that up. I think he was like really undersized when he was coming out, Ryan, I believe.
Was that Iowa?
Yeah. The kid, yes. He was a 6 foot coming out of Iowa. He was a 6'2". He was listed like 6'2", 255. Coming out of Iowa. Once he gets drafted, he's what, like 6'3", about 300?
Who are we talking about right now?
Tyler Linderbaum.
Oh, Linderbaum. Yeah. Yep.
Linderbaum.
Yeah, he was an undersized defensive tackle at first in his college career. So
Right. So guys
happens all the time,
man.
Happens all the time.
At that position especially.
Yes. Dude, go to Northern Iowa. You just mentioned Spencer Brown, but like they have a bunch of dudes that are like that. Ellerson Smith, their defensive end, went from a 6'6", 200-pound linebacker as a freshman to a 6'7", 265-pound defensive end by the time he was a senior. Like dudes were putting on crazy weight, man. Absolute crazy weight.
Yeah, somebody pointed out in the chat, Anthony Davis. People say, well, why? He's a skilled big man. Yeah, because he's played guard most of his life.
Seriously.
He didn't grow until he got a lot older. So that stuff happens all the time. That's why you have people like Matt Bayless that can look at frames and give some level of, no one's perfect, but you can give some level of, hey, I think this kid has a chance to be this. Or this kid looks pretty maxed out.
Yeah.
We got a question here from Jay Henry.
Jay says, could we see Braylon James become a deep threat like Jalen Hyatt, or will Parker use multiple players for that?
Well, yeah, I think he can become that guy for sure. That's the one thing that you and I have always said about him. I don't know if he's going to develop the other skills needed to be a great receiver. Is he going to become a great route runner? Is he going to catch the ball consistently? Those type of things. But the one thing I've always felt without question Braylon James is going to be able to do is stretch the field.
Yes.
That was never questioned. Now, could he be an every down receiver? That we didn't know. Was he going to be Chris Brown or could he become Will Fuller? We don't know the answer to that, and that's still to be determined. But the tools are there for him to be absolutely a vertical threat because he not only brings legit home run speed, but he's taller.
He's lengthy.
So he's 6'2" and a half. He's got long arms. So he doesn't, sometimes the smaller, fast guys, you got to be a little bit, your margin for error is a little bit smaller. Braylon's got those tools. And for those that are wondering, we had a pretty good update, Ryan. I think it caught you a little bit by surprise, the update that we had on Braylon James on the board. So just another reason, folks, you got to be on the message board.
Yes.
Got to be on the message board.
Love to hear from Braylon, man, though. Love to hear it. Yes.
Yep. Benjamin Carchi has a question here, Ryan.
Says, Brian, are all the photos that IB uses for the platform taken by your wife?
Not all of them, no. So like all the practice ones that we've had so far are taken by my wife. We have a lot of game photos that my wife took, but she couldn't be at all the games last year, and she's just one person, so she can't shoot everybody. But yeah, she takes a lot of them. She actually did a lot of photography for us when I was at Blue and Gold. She actually had like 4 or 5 cover photos for the magazine, so she's got a great eye for that. And but yeah, she takes a lot. So if I were to look at the board or the front page now, the photo of Nolan Ziegler that we have on the page now, the him in the green, she took that. The photo that I have on the midweek mailbag last night of Tobias Merriweather, she took that. The Al Golden photo, she took that. So yeah, a lot of the photos that are on there now, she took. The photo, what Alex Graham offer story of Mike Micken, she took that. So yeah, she's got a great eye. She does have a great eye. So yeah, she's taken a lot of them, but not all of them. Because like I said, she can't be at she runs her own business. So she can't be at every practice. She isn't at every game as much as I would like for her to be at those. But yeah, so she takes a lot of them. She takes a lot of them. I'm hoping the next year we can start putting galleries out on Sundays of what she does. But with the problem is she gets home and she'll cut up a few that I need for stories, but then she can't get to right away because her job kind of keeps her busy. But yeah, she does a great job. And yeah, so thank you for asking. Thanks for asking. Here's another one from Fighting Irish Raiders.
Fighting Irish Raiders says, hey guys, the fact that Justin Scott hasn't committed to us yet, is it a good or bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing, right? So this one is a situation where Justin Scott was close to committing. We all know this story
Twice.
at this point, right? Twice, yeah. we know this story already if you've been around this channel or on the message board. But he put it, he said, I'm going to kind of take a step back. I'm going to take some visits, all that great stuff. So after the most recent visit, we weren't anticipating Justin Scott to commit there, right? Because he has visits set up to Georgia. He's got a visit set up to Miami, Ohio State. Like he's got a couple officials and then an unofficial, I believe, to Miami set up right now, right? So we knew that this one was going to go into June. It's going to at least go into June. There's going to be a couple visits that are taken. The big thing, though, is that trying to get Justin Scott back for another visit before he makes his decision. Mm-hmm. That is going to be a big opportunity for Notre Dame. We still feel really good about where Notre Dame is, but you have to close and you have to be able to withstand, obviously, him going to take a look at Georgia and Miami and then Ohio State for an official.
Yeah. It's neither. I would agree. It's neither. Because here's the thing. If he'd have committed by now, what's to say he wouldn't kind of be like Keon where he wants to look around still?
Yep.
And then you get into the debates of, well, hey, we have a policy. You knew the policy. We have to stick to the policy, which then creates problems. So I think they've handled his recruitment a little bit different. They encouraged him when he was having second thoughts. Man, there's no need for you to commit. You're the one that decided you wanted to commit right now. We didn't tell you needed to commit. So if you want to take your time, bro, take your time. We love you. Justin, we'll take you, man, if you want to commit now or if you want to commit on signing day. We want you no matter what. And that's that Marcus Freeman's taking that approach and Chad Bowden. And I got to say, Ryan, I think you guys mentioned this in your recruiting show, which I appreciated you doing. But on the board, I gave a lot of credit to Al Washington, too. I mean, look, Marcus is doing Coach Freeman's doing a great job here. Chad Bowden's doing a great job here. But Al Washington has improved his recruiting strategy and effort and focus and doing more of the right thing right now with Justin Scott. And that's factored in as well. That's important. Yeah. It's very important. So it's the way I've always said. It's never personal. I don't have anything against Al Washington whatsoever. In fact, I've heard very good things about him as a human being. But my job is to give honest assessment. Like people get mad, oh, you're too hard on the administration. Well, maybe, but I'm telling you facts. I'm not telling you just my opinion. I'm telling you things that I know, things that I hear, things that I see. I know what's happening in other schools. I know coaches that have left that have told me, even if not big time pros, say we get way more support in this area than Notre Dame gave. You know what I mean? So I'm going to be honest about that. You can not like it all you want, but we're not going to lie to you. And we're not going to just bang on a guy just to bang on a guy. And we're also not going to praise a guy just because we're Homer fanboys that want that guy to talk to us and give us recruiting intel. We're going to be honest with you. And Al Washington was not doing the job. But you know what he's doing? He's getting better. He's doing a better job, and he's refocusing, and that's important. And when you do that, we'll praise you for it. And I'd rather praise him than be critical of him. Same with Al Golden. I have a great deal of respect for Al Golden as a human being. I want him to be successful at Notre Dame. So when he is, I'm going to praise him for it. And from everything I've been told about Al Washington, he's a good dude. I don't know him personally. He's a good dude from what I've been told. But he wasn't doing a good job. Now he's stepping it up. He's doing better, at least with Justin Scott. So that's a good thing. And that helps.
Yeah, you hear good things about Justin Scott. I will also say when I talked to Kingston Villamoasa, who is the top priority at linebacker in 2024 for Notre Dame, he spoke a lot about Al Washington, which I thought was a very good thing because he had a previous relationship at Ohio State. So Al Washington's maintained that relationship and been pretty vital in that recruitment as well. And I mean, if Notre Dame ends up landing Justin Scott in Kingston, like you have to look at Al Washington and be like, he gets two pluses on that one, man. Like for sure.
That's right. And that's a big time top 100 dude right there in Kingston.
Yes.
In a year where your linebacker board's not filled with a lot of dudes like him.
Yep.
So yes, absolutely. And a school that you don't do a lot of good with sometimes. Here's the next question, Ryan. This is an interesting one here.
From Andre Tonsil, who is the best unknown player 2023 in the team?
We were asked something similar to this recently, Andre, and my whole thing is I hope that when you listen to the show enough that there's nobody that's unknown to you. But I look at it a little bit and say, what about the casual fan? The people who don't listen to shows like this all the time or just watch the team and loosely follow the team or outsiders who aren't Notre Dame fans. Yep. I really think it's going to be just Jason Onye. I really do. And I'm going to have something on him in the defensive intel piece. He's a guy that I've heard from things from multiple people about. One of the other I think Prince Colley had a comment about him.
Prince Colley, yeah.
We've heard a lot of good things about what he's doing. He's a guy, Ryan, that I think has a lot of potential. Lot of potential. And I think people are going to know about him. He's unknown now, but I don't think that's going to last for a whole lot longer.
Yeah, and I think from a national perspective as well, I would say one of the Vipers, I mean, I think people might know who Jordan Botelho is, but maybe not as much, like he was kind of seldom used last year, right? So
don't you think like the casual fan knows about him because of when he signed, he was one of the top defensive recruits in the class. And,
Notre Dame fans know Jordan Botelho for sure. I'm saying from like a national perspective of people that don't follow Notre Dame as much, like it might surprise you like, oh wow, Jordan Botelho has like 8-9 sacks this year. Like, wow, that's crazy. I don't know who that guy is.
You know who that won't shock? South Carolina fans. What non-Notre Dame people? South Carolina fans, yep, we saw that one. Dude had like 10 pressures and 2 sacks against us in the bowl game. Yep, we're not surprised by that.
I'm still so upset about the people that we get all 22 from. Have you noticed that the Notre Dame bowl game's not in there?
Yeah,
it's like
a little annoyed by that.
Yeah, I'm very annoyed by that.
Yeah.
I'm very annoyed by that.
Yeah,
I want to rewatch that, man. I want to rewatch that.
All right, here we go. Here's one from Nathan Milton.
Said, how would you compare Gerby Lambert and Charles Jagasaw? Well,
they're very different.
Yes. I mean, I think, all right, here's what they have in common. They're long and they're athletic in different ways, though, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, Gerby's smooth, right? Like he's a really smooth dude.
Ronnie Stanley.
Yes.
Ronnie Stanley.
I think that's a good one. He has a developing power profile, but there's a lot of room to grow. Charles Jagasaw has been powerful for multiple years now, right? Like he is a physically imposing dude, was raw as a junior. I think took a big step as a senior. He plays with great leverage. He's a wrestler, right? So like that makes a lot more sense. He's a guy that is much more powerful and explosive than Gerby is, though. But Gerby's very smooth, and he's a true blindside protector. Like Gerby's a left tackle at the next level. And so I think, they both are lengthy dudes. They both are offensive tackle types. But I think for me, I would say Gerby is more of a smooth moving type of offensive tackle, while Charles Jagasaw is a big, ferocious, explosive offensive tackle.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the next question here from Brandon Plenzner.
Brandon's question is, would you agree with the Notre Dame staff if they decide to take commitments from both 2025 legacy recruits, James Flanagan and Jerome Bettis Jr.?
Yes, but for different reasons. Here's what I mean. For James Flanagan, it's a no-brainer. James Flanagan is legit. If James Flanagan's dad was some dude that worked construction that never played at Notre Dame, I'd say, yeah, I'd take that dude. He's really good.
Yeah.
The fact that his dad played at Notre Dame only adds to that. And it's why I'd be willing to take his commitment this early, because I know the DNA is there and he's already really good.
Yeah.
With Jerome Bettis Jr., I don't think he's a Notre Dame caliber player today, or at least from what I saw in film of him as a sophomore. But there's twofold. Number one is his dad is a tremendous ambassador of the university and always has been. And number two, I'm betting on the DNA. I am, and he's got a good frame and there's some stuff to work with. So, yeah, I would say yes on both, but for different reasons. One is that guy can play here right now as far as for his, at least for his age. He's ready to be in the class right now. Not that he can play at Notre Dame right now, but like he is a Notre Dame caliber prospect right now. James Flanagan, to me, Ryan, again, if his dad was not a former Notre Dame player, I would take him in this 25 class. Jerome Bettis, I would not. If his name was Jerome Jones Jr. and his dad, drove a truck or worked construction or whatever, I'd say, I want to see him at camp. I want to wait a little bit and that kind of thing. He's got to show me more. But because his dad is Jerome Bettis Jr., I'm banking on the DNA. I'm willing to take that chance because you're always going to take flyers. I'd much rather take a flyer on a Jerome Bettis Jr. than some kid who I don't have as much knowledge of and background of. So it's as honest of an opinion as I could possibly give on that one. I'd love to be able to tell you, Jerome's legit. He's going to be a great player. I wish I could tell you that. Just like I wish you could have told you that Rahib Ismail Jr. was that kind of guy. I would have loved to have had him at Notre Dame. Went to Wyoming for a reason.
Or Jerry Rice Jr. when he went to UCLA and he wasn't very good.
Right. So, but in this case, I'm hoping that the DNA, because like I'd have told you the same thing about Bryce Young. I'm taking him because of who his dad was. But as over the last year, guess what, Ryan? I would have bet on the DNA a year ago. I told you this. I'm betting on the DNA because I saw the frame and all this. He wasn't a Division I football player at the time. He is now, right? The DNA is kicking in. And now all of a sudden you're like, I want Bryce Young now. Not because of who his dad is, but because of this guy projects to have a shot to be a good football player.
Because he's 6'5", 240 with arms and
a huge frame, and now the dad's DNA is why that's the case. Yes, but the point is, if you'd have bet on the DNA a year ago, that bet's starting to pay off now.
Yep.
And I'd say the same thing with Jerome Bettis Jr. at this point in time.
Yeah, I think we see him very similarly, man. I think James Flanagan is right near the top of the tight end board as far as the talent in the 2025 class, right? Like we mentioned it already, like the Elias Williams kid is incredibly talented. Ethan Barbour is very talented. Ryan Gee is a kid that's going to be on campus. That's a different type, but he's also talented. There's a lot of talented tight ends, but I think James Flanagan is right near the top at that conversation point. Jerome is a guy that I want to see more from, 100%. Like, I want to see what he looks like. He was at Westminster School last year. He's going to be at Woodward Academy this year in Georgia. I want to see what Jerome Bettis looks like as a junior. I want to see it, right? Like, for me as a person that watches film and, wants to see kind of what, if he takes the next step, I think he's got tools, like you said. I mean, 6'2", 175. He's got pretty decent length, but just want to see more, man. Just want to see more.
Let's get to some more here, Ryan. Here's some good questions. Here's one from Rob Thidoff. Thank you, Rob.
Rob's question is, if Jose Rio doesn't battle injuries his whole career, is he a Hall of Famer? His 1990 World Series MVP performance was one for the books, in my opinion.
Yeah, his World Series performance was phenomenal, right? And the fact that he missed like 6 years and came back and pitched tells you the guy was a pretty good player. But I don't know if I'd say that he was I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I'd say probably not. I mean, he had some good years. I mean, the year in 1990, he had a 2.7 ERA, pitched 197 innings. It's hard to say. He was never as good, Ryan, in the regular season as he was that year in the postseason.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he just went against the A's and was just absolutely tremendous. He didn't pitch that well against the Pirates, though. Right? I mean, he pitched 2 games against the Pirates and had a 4.38 ERA. He got roughed up in one of the games against the Pirates. And then he went 1-0, but one of the games against the Pirates, they roughed him up a little bit. He was absolutely brilliant against the A's. I don't think he was ever that guy. I think he'd have been very similar to Jack Morris, maybe a little bit better ERA, not as dominant from a strikeout standpoint. Jack Morris, the debate on him is, he was one of the best postseason pitchers of all time, but he just wasn't a great regular season pitcher.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's a good question, Rob. I think he would at least be I'd love to have found out. I'll tell you that right now. But, he went through a stretch of about 4 or 5 years where Jose had a sub-3 ERA in an era where, you had some guys that way, but you didn't have a ton. I mean, it wasn't like a dead ball era per se.
Right.
So yeah, he had some good stuff, man. When but that was the maddening thing about Jose growing up, is when he was on, he was filthy. But then you'd be like, dude, third inning, So he was a little bit maddening at times, but yeah, injuries, and back then injuries were just so devastating for pitchers, what they are now. But yeah, that Reds pitching staff in 1990 was so unique. They had Tom Browning was on that staff. You had Danny Jackson was on that staff, and then Jack Armstrong came out of nowhere that year. I think he won 17 or 18 games or something like that year. So I think that was the year he did that. Am I wrong on that, or was that the year before? Let me look this up here real quick. Give me a second, Ryan, because now it's going to bother me. No, Jack Armstrong didn't do it that year. I think it might have been the year before. Let me look that up. No, that was the year he had double-digit wins. And then Danny Jackson was on that Reds team, and he wasn't great that year, but the year before he was nasty for the Reds. So, or 2 years before. So he was injured a lot the year they won the World Series, but 2 years before, I think he was runner-up to Earl Hershiser for the Cy Young. He had a great year. But that bullpen that year was the Nasty Boys. That was a fun team.
Something called it Nasty Boys.
That's their nickname. Is Rob Dibble, Norm Charlton, and Randy Myers. They were called the Nasty Boys.
Nice.
Yeah, and they threw gas.
I remember Dibble. Dibble. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the lowest of the three, but he threw hard.
Yes, he did.
He was a big meathead too. But
there was a show called Pros versus Joes, and I remember Rob Dibble came on it a couple times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
he's an interesting guy.
Still trying to throw gas at guys and stuff.
Yeah, very interesting guy. All right, here's a question from Tyler Smith.
Tyler's question is: name your top 5 best special teams players from Notre Dame you have witnessed. Special teams players. Wow.
Well, Rocket's at the top of the list. I mean,
yeah,
Rocket's got to be there. Alan Rossum was a pretty darn good special teams player when he was there. So if we're talking special teams, Justin Yoon was outstanding.
Yeah.
Craig Hentrick was outstanding. He was very good. And
was John Carney
before my time,
Dame, right?
A little before my time. He was on the early Luke teams, I believe.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Let's. I'm trying to who. I mean, Joey Getherall. I think about him being in that conversation, but
as far as coverage units, Matthias Farley was really good, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a very good special teams guy. Yeah, that's a good one. And George Atkinson had some big returns, but he was inconsistent. Frank McCatry, LSU fan, Tommy Zibikowski is a punt returner. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
That's a really good one. Tommy was a really good, and Tommy had clutch returns too. Like he had the big one against USC. So that's a good one, Frank. That's a good one.
Zibby's a good one. Zibby's a really good one.
Yeah, I'd probably put him over Joey Getherall, to be completely honest with you. I probably would. He was pretty good. Here's a guy that we should in the conversation, but what was the guy's name? He punted for the Colts for a long time.
Oh, Hunter Smith.
Hunter Smith.
Yeah.
Now, funny thing is, Hunter Smith was a really good football player, Ryan, coming out of high school. He was like a legit, not that he could have played at Notre Dame, but in high school, he played I think he played wide receiver or something like that. He was a legit football player. He was kind of like Jay Bramlett. Remember how Jay Bramlett was the starting quarterback for his high school football team? Yep. Hunter Smith was like that coming out of Texas. He was a good dude. He was a good player. He was a good player.
He was really good. Dude, he was in the NFL forever, man.
Yeah. Somebody said Tim Brown. Tim Brown, I don't really I've said this before. I don't really remember Tim Brown at Notre Dame as much. I remember his high school Heisman season, but I don't remember watching him.
Yep.
So that's why he's not on there for me. And Golden Tate had a couple big returns, but he wasn't consistent as a return man.
Justin Yoon's a good one, man. You gotta give Yoon some love in that.
I think he was the first kicker that I mentioned, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. He was so money.
He was very, very consistent too, man.
Yeah.
Very consistent.
That's the group. That's a good question. Good question.
Oh, wait. We didn't say any long snappers though, man. We gotta throw the long snappers.
JJ Jansen's played in the NFL for 20 years.
Exactly.
I'll tell you something right now. He doesn't get talked about a lot, but Michael Vincent is probably the most consistent long snapper. I don't remember JJ Jansen. I mean, I followed the team then, but I didn't pay attention to long snappers. Notre Dame's had some good long snappers in the last 10 years. John Shannon was a good long snapper. Scott Daly was a good long snapper. Michael Vincent, to me, is the best snapper they've had in the last decade. How does he stack up against guys before? I don't know. I didn't pay attention to long snapping until I started covering the team. But since I started covering Notre Dame in 2010, he's the best long snapper they've had. I mean, he gets zip. He's accurate. He can run down the field. He's a good long snapper, or short and long snapper. I say snapper because he does both.
Yes.
He's really good. He's really good. So he if you're gonna pick, like, if you had to pick, like, okay, you could pick a kick returner. Here'd be the fun thing, Ryan. You can pick 5, but you can only pick one kicker, one punter, one kick returner, one punt returner, and one snapper. My snapper's Vincent. My kicker's probably Justin Yoon. My punt returner, I'd probably go with Zibby.
Yeah.
And then you know who else is a great punt returner at Notre Dame? Ricky Waters.
Yeah.
Probably go with Zibby, and then my kick returner, that's a no-brainer. It's Rocket. You could easily go with Rocket as your punt returner too, but I'm just trying to pick somebody different.
Yeah.
But I'd go with Zibby or Ricky Waters as my punt returner, because Ricky had a huge punt return for a touchdown against Michigan in '88 to help win that game. It was a close, low-scoring game. But I'd go with Zibby, and then that'd be my 5, Ryan. Be my 5. What your 5, since you didn't really know Rocket?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would probably go George Atkinson as my kick returner, just because I haven't seen a ton of great kick returners in my lifetime. Like that, I can.
CJ Sanders was pretty good.
He was good. Yeah. I'd probably still go George. Zibby's an easy one.
I think CJ finished second all time behind Rocket in most kick plus punt returns for touchdowns in his career. I think he's second to Rocket all time. Yeah. He had some on that really crap 2016 team. That's a problem.
Yeah, true.
So people forget about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Vincent or Daly was really good too.
Yeah.
I like Scott Daly. So I mean, either one there. And then give me Matthias Farley in all my coverage units, man. And we're
there you go.
Cooking with grease there.
There you go. Yep, there you go. All right, let's get to the next one here, Ryan. We got one from C. Watson 9.
His question is their comment is, just want to say I love watching the show.
Got a couple questions coming up, but I wanted to get this up first. Sorry, Ryan. I should have warned you for that.
No, you're good. Just want to say I love watching this show. You guys do an amazing job, and I so love the Fighting Irish and love Notre Dame lacrosse. Keep up. Awesome job, guys. Go Irish. You as well. And here the question is, question from Steve Watson 5. Who will be the starting tight end this year for the Irish? Mitchell Evans.
Yeah, most likely, but I could see Holden Stace pushing them. I
hope so.
It's going to be one of those things where, Mitchell, I think, could have a really good year, and I think Holden Stace pushing him could be a thing that sparks him to be even better. Competition, folks, in football and all sports is a great thing. And Mitchell's going to work hard, but when you've got to work hard and a dude is breathing down your neck, it just makes you push even harder and focus in even harder every single day, which makes you a better player. We had a little nugget about the quarterback position in the intel piece about that, Ryan, that factored into that. It's a very, very big thing.
And next question is, what Notre Dame's team looks much bigger this year. Do you agree? Do you guys agree?
Yes. I mean, Ryan, we're complaining about the size of the defensive tackles, and now it's like, other than like Donovan Heinisch and Howard Cross, like everyone's over 290 pounds now.
Yeah.
And it's happened.
I feel like you blinked your eye and it happened too, right?
Because what happened is a lot of those, freshmen went to become sophomores, and sophomores became juniors, and that weight's coming on. Yep. Javonte Jean-Baptiste adds a lot of length at that position. Your offensive line's blowing up. We talked about this. There wasn't a lot of size at receiver last year. Yeah. Early on, 2 years ago, you had Kevin Austin, and then not a lot of size after that. Now you've got Dion, you've got Tobias, you've got Caleb Smith, you've got Jaden Thomas, you've got Braylon James, you've got, now all of a sudden Jaden Greathouse is small at 6'1", 213. He'd have been your second biggest guy 2 years ago behind Kevin Austin.
I mean, talk about the corners that you have now too, man. They're all massive.
You're huge at running. Like your small running back of your top 2 is Logan Diggs at 214. He's your small guy. Yeah. Linebacker, they're not real big. Safety, they're not real big, but everywhere else, man, they've got really good size. Like you said, great length at corner.
Yes.
So yeah, I think they're definitely bigger. And it's good big too. Like Kane Madden had good weight, but he wasn't very tall. He wasn't long. I would say that's an accurate observation. C. Watson. I would definitely agree with that.
I feel like they're more athletic too than a couple years ago.
Oh, there's no doubt.
It's. Look, man, there's a reason that we're excited for the season coming up, right? It's the fact that there's more size and there's more speed, there's more athleticism. Like it's gonna be interesting, man. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, to me, Ryan, I've said this before. I'm going to go on record and say it. This has a chance I mean, just right now, I
Yeah.
believe this is Notre Dame's deepest and most athletic team since 2015. Right now, will it be 2015 level? We'll find out. I think there's more athletes on this team, but but what we don't know is if there's the really star elite athletes like a Will Fuller, like a Jalen Smith,
Yeah.
that like a CJ Procise. Do they have that? We're gonna find out.
And whether the windows match up, right? Like you have a 6-year quarterback, but like, are the receivers ready? Are the running backs?
Right.
I mean, did they take it to the next level? Like, there's just windows matching up that I think is the biggest question for me. But it's exciting, man. A lot of talent.
Yeah, they have a chance to be that. Now, as I said on Bill King show today, can they play football? We're gonna find out.
Exactly.
Right? Because there's a difference between being really athletic and being a really good football team. We're gonna find out if they're a really good football team. That remains to be seen. I'm optimistic. Vince and I went for a drive yesterday and went and got dinner. And I said to him, I said, man, I'm having a hard time trying to be cautious about this team. And he was like, dude, I'm trying to be so I'm trying not to get fired up right now. We're trying to just be, and he's like, but it's hard, man. Every time we see this team in person, we see guys, man, like when you see Braylon James catching balls, it's a couple little clips out of context from a practice, but it's just like, that's the talent that we saw, right? Like that's the elite skill that we saw in high school. And then you're like, man, boy, if this guy can, but they didn't have a Braylon James on last year's team, right? Yeah. I mean, he's different. Tobias is different than Braylon. They're completely different type of players, in my opinion. So you get a guy like that, man, and it's, boy. Yeah. It's fun to see, man. It's really fun to see. So we got a couple more here, Ryan. So let's get down to this question right here from Jason Rose. It's a good one.
His question is, hey, guys, what are your predictions for the quarterback battle at Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio States? So we're predicting winners of these outcomes?
Yeah. Texas, I would say Quinn Ewers.
I would say Quinn to start the year at least. Yes, I agree. Bama? I actually think it might be Jalen Milroe, man. I don't know.
If Tommy Reese gets to determine who the starter is.
Oh, good point. Good point.
I'm saying no, hold on, because I don't know that he will. I mean, I don't know if Nick Saban's going to say, no, Jalen's going to be our starter, or if Tommy gets to pick his guy. I got to think if Tommy gets to pick his guy, it's going to be Ty Simpson.
That's true.
If he doesn't, then, maybe Jalen Milroe has a chance. But it's either going to be, to me, my prediction is it's either going to be Ty Simpson or a transfer.
Interesting.
Like a post-spring transfer. You know what I mean? That would be my guess, which is also partly why I'm not super thrilled about Alabama's season. If it's one of those two guys, they're not going to be on the same level at quarterback as a lot of other top teams. And this is part of the reason I say, if you're talking to me about 2024, stop.
Yeah.
Like the 24 season, stop. Because Bama's going to have maybe Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe, and Georgia's probably going to have Carson Beck.
Yeah, I think
it's a nice player, but that's not a guy that, oh my gosh, I don't know if you can beat him with that team. That's not Tua. That's not Trevor Lawrence. That's not Kyler Murray. That's not Joe Burrow. It's not those guys. Solid quarterbacks, but not those guys.
Agree.
What are your thoughts on Georgia, Ryan?
I think it's Carson Beck. Yeah, I think he's the oldest guy in the room, if I'm correct, right? Because they had Brock Vandergriff that came in, and then I forget the other kid's name. That's a little bit Gunnar Stockton, right?
Right. So, he's going to be a freshman this year, right? Wasn't Gunnar in the 23 class?
I think he was in 22. I think he's a redshirt freshman.
22 class?
Okay. Yeah, I believe so. Okay. So I think that it'll probably be Carson Beck just because the experience. And they hired Mike Bobo that was already on the staff. So, like, experience matters in that type of situation, in my opinion. So,
and I think Beck is going to be the guy that makes the least mistakes, as the veteran, and that's going to matter. Vandergriff is always a little overrated to me. Nice quarterback, but always a little overrated to me. Stockton is just a different type of kid. I mean, Stockton's kind of a run-throw type. He's like their version of Tyler Buckner.
Yeah.
A little bit, and I don't know how well that fits into what they do. But if I had to say who's going to pull off an upset, I'd probably put money on Gunnar before I would Vandergriff, to be completely honest with you.
That's fair.
Because at least you could say, why is he going to win the job? Because he brings that different element that maybe they think that they need. Hey, we're not sure if we're going to be dynamic enough here or there in the run game or whatever to be good. I know that Kendall Milton, I think, is what I saw the other day. He's hurt again. So they may say, hey, we need to have a guy that can make some plays with his legs. If that's your guy you want, then you're going to run with Gunnar Stockton. If they need a guy that, hey, I just need you to manage the offense, then I think it's going to be Carson Beck. Then the last one is going to be Ohio State.
I think it's Devin. I think it's going to be Devin Brown. I
I
really
think
do.
it's going to be
I think
Kyle
so.
McCord. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's
See.
Kyle McCord. Yeah. He's a
I
better
think it
player than
probably.
Devin Brown.
I think
to
it
me.
probably should be Kyle McCord, but I hear that Ohio State loves
Yeah.
Devin Brown, man. So we'll see.
Yep. If it's Devin Brown, I'm a lot less concerned about Ohio State than I am if it's Kyle McCord. I'll just put it to you like that. I'll just put it to you like that. I would much rather face Devin Brown in 2023 than Kyle McCord. So I hope you're right in that instance, Ryan. I definitely hope you're right on that. So, but like this is my thing though. Like, three of those teams are national title, assumed national title contenders.
Yep.
I wouldn't take any of those teams' quarterbacks over Notre Dame's 1-2 right now. Not one. Not one. I wouldn't, and I bet you, be willing to bet you if you get Tommy Rees in an honest moment, he'd say, "I wish I could trade my 2 quarterbacks for the 2 that I brought into Notre Dame."
It's true.
I'd be willing to bet you a lot of money he'd say that if he was allowed to be honest about it.
I believe it.
You know, you don't think he'd trade Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroy for Sam Hartman and Tyler Buckner? He'd do it in a heartbeat.
I think he would,
in my opinion, a heartbeat. So I wouldn't trade him for those 2 for Carson Beck and whoever you view as the number 2 at Georgia. The only 2 that I would consider is would be the 2 at Ohio State. To be honest, I'm very high on Kyle McCord, very high on him. The Texas kids, it's Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy, and Arch Manning, right? Those are the 3 in that competition.
Yeah,
I've told you before, they're good players. I think Arch and Ewers are both overrated, in my opinion. And they don't have the experience like a Sam Hartman has. Now, if we're just talking God-given ability, who has the highest draft pick potential, sure, okay, fine. We'll take Texas.
it's all them, yeah,
But
probably.
But right now, for 2023, it's not. It would not be. How would you rank those quarterback rooms, Ryan? 1 to 4.
Those quarterback rooms, just based upon 2023 or just overall talents? It's a little
just based on going for this season. Just for this season.
Man, I guess Ohio State.
You'd go Texas number 1, just God-given ability, right? Just raw talent. Yeah, same here.
I'd probably go Ohio State 1, Texas 2, Bama 3, Georgia 4.
Okay. Yeah, I'd put Bama 4. I'm not a big Ty Simpson fan. I actually like Carson Beck. He's a nice, good, he's a Jake Fromm type of guy, Ryan. I mean, that's what I think Carson Beck can be. You know, that's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I like
they went to a national championship with Jake
right.
Fromm. So
as a true freshman, came into Notre Dame Stadium and beat Notre Dame in his first career start. So
he did.
You know, I think that's what Carson Beck can be. I just don't know if he's a difference maker kind of guy. If I'm going for 2023, I'd still probably put Texas number 1 because the one thing that Quinn Ewers has that none of the other quarterbacks we're talking about have is experience.
True.
He went through a whole season as a starter, and then now you've got 2 very talented players in Murphy and
Arch Manning. Yep. I think that makes sense, man. I would say for me, like, it also, I mean, it doesn't hurt that Texas has Steve Sarkisian as well. Ohio State has Ryan Day. So, like, a couple of these quarterback rooms are in pretty good situations, right? Like, we have to see, obviously, what Tommy does with Bama and what Mike Bobo does with Georgia. But, you know, so there's a couple outliers, or not outliers, but a couple question marks with offensive coordinators. But the Texas room is going to be under a pretty dang good offensive coordinator, and so is Ohio State. So
I'll say this. Here's my final answer. Texas 1. If Kyle McCord starts, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Bama 4. If Devin Brown starts, it's Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Bama.
Interesting.
Where would you rank Notre Dame in that group?
They'd be number 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So for 2023,
that's why I'm not wanting to talk about 2024. That right there. The last 2 comments. This is the most athletic team we've seen from Notre Dame in a long time, and they've got one of the best quarterback rooms in college football, in my opinion.
I mean, Sam Hartman's the best college quarterback on that list by a landslide right now. Like, he's the one that's actually played a lot. So you know what I mean? So
he's a guy that we were talking earlier about Brady Quinn's stats. He's a guy that already has 1,000 yards more career passing than Brady Quinn had.
Yes.
Right.
And
so
15 more touchdown passes. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's
pretty good, man.
Notre Dame.
Good.
Yeah. I really like Kyle McCord, though. I hope Ohio State screws that one up and goes with the 7-on-7 passer, which is what Devin Brown is to me.
I really do think they're going to do it, man. We'll see. Though.
I hope they do, man. I hope you are right. I am not arguing with you one bit. I hope you are spot on that they go with Devin Brown over Kyle McCord. Spot on. And I just hope they don't realize their mistake before the Notre Dame game. That's my hope is that that's the case. Here's one for you, Ryan, that I'll ask. This is from C. Watson, and he says, "What round do you see Isaiah Foskey going in the draft?"
I think it's going to go in the second round. I don't think that it's going to be a first round pick. Like if he got picked in the late 20s, 30s, like would I be shocked? No, I'm not. I wouldn't say shocked, but I think second round is probably the sweet spot for Isaiah. He's got all the talent in the world. I think people understand that, but there's still obviously some questions about the immediate impact, I think, on the next level. So I think second round for Isaiah.
I have a hard time, Ryan, when you look at I think the combine cemented him being a second round pick for me. And here's why I say that. There's a lot you can pick apart in this game. You and I have talked about this. But his combination of size / length, athletic skill, and production is going to, I think, make it hard for him to get past the second round. And this is why teams that win all the time win, because they're smart enough not to take him at 29, but smart enough to make sure they don't pass on him in the 50s or 60s. And that's why those teams win, because they're not willing to overthink it and say, yeah, he wasn't a good fit for us. It was a reach for us at 29, but he's fallen to 52. You know what? Not only going to take him, we're going to trade up 5 spots and take him and give up a 6th round pick or something like that to take him. And that's why teams like that win all the time, is because they properly value those traits and don't overthink the things that have to be improved to the point where they then convince him he's not a round 2, but they're smart enough not to take him in round 1 as well.
Yeah.
That to me is the thing. But that's why I saw your guy, Jordan Reed, who we both think does great work. I thought he had Foskey like 52, 53 in his latest mock draft. I could see that. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah.
That's the one thing that ESPN has done well is they gave Jordan Reed a job. Otherwise, not too much.
Agree. Because you're like, look, even when I don't agree with him, Ryan, it's like I know him well enough to know, and I can hear his points. But like, yeah, I get where he's coming from. It makes sense, even if I don't necessarily agree with his take on a player.
And you never question if Jordan has actually done the work. And there's some guys that you do question if they've done the work. So
there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. And then this is our last question, Ryan. I think this is a very interesting question. This is from Hulk Strongest.
Hulk's strongest question is: if Tyler Buchner improves, would you credit Gaduli more or Tommy or TB?
Tyler Buchner.
Or Tyler Buchner just being a dog and his talent coming out?
I think 3 people deserve credit if Tyler Buchner improves this year, and it's Tyler Buchner for putting in the work and having the right attitude. It's Gino Gaduli for helping him to really refine his game, and it's Tommy Rees. You can't ignore the fact that Tommy Rees helped him improve last year as well. And I realize that there's some people in this audience that just Tommy Rees sucks at everything, and I'm glad he's gone. Okay, that's fine. And there's things that Tommy Rees deserved criticism for. I mean, go back and listen to our post-game show after Marshall. Right. Go back and listen to our post-game show after Cal. Go listen to our post-game show after the Navy game, in the second half of the Navy game. Go back. Oh, if you really want to have some fun, go listen to our post-game show after Stanford.
Oh,
right. Yeah. And tell me I don't criticize Tommy Rees enough. But also, I'm not one of those people that say, well, I can never give him credit for anything. This is what we do here, Ryan. I don't care what your feelings are about a guy. When he deserves praise, he deserves praise. When he deserves criticism, he's going to get criticism.
Yep.
The reality is Tommy helped Tyler get better. Now, did he get him all the way there? No, he didn't, which is why Coach Gaduli's going to deserve a lot of credit for that as well, because Tommy got him here, and then Coach Gaduli's going to get him to the next level. That's part of the development. And then, of course, Tyler's got to stick it out, see it through, have the right attitude, and put in the work. And so I think they all get credit for that, in my opinion.
And Tommy Rees also – and if Tyler Buchner does make massive improvements and becomes that guy, Tommy Rees was also the one that got him to campus, right? So, like, that's another big thing. He was obviously a big piece of that recruitment as well.
And here's somebody else that deserves a lot of credit. Marcus Freeman. I'm going to tell you why. When Tyler threw that pick 6 after South Carolina, that could have been a moment where the previous coach would have just verbally, like, gone off on it.
Yes. Yep.
And you saw Marcus from going up to him and be like, hey, man, you're better than that. You know better than that. Hey, this is what you got to do. Don't make the mistake again. Get back out there and go lead us. And then because you saw Tyler come off the field really agitated.
Yep.
And as he was talking with Freeman, they just both, it's like, just chill out. And then you saw Tyler just kind of, it's almost like you saw the weight of the world get off his shoulders. Like, okay, I'm not about to get my butt chewed out right now. Coach has got my back. Just go out there and ball, man. You're my guy. Go out there and ball. And I think that was a turning point moment for Tyler, in my opinion. Like, hey, coach believes in you, right? Just go out there and play. And that next series, he looked calm and fine. And, they ran the ball and he made a couple clutch throws, made a huge third down throw to move the chains, I think the touchdown to Mitchell Evans was a third down throw, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
So, and made the plays you needed to make to win a football game. I think that is where a head coach can have a big, big point in how a guy responds. Like, hey, did Marcus Freeman teach Tyler Buckner a thing about mechanics? No. Did Marcus Freeman teach him how to read a defense? No. Did Marcus Freeman teach him how to be a winner and how to have the right, quarterback's got to be here all the time? Did he let Tyler know we believe in you? Yeah, he did those things, and that's what a head coach is supposed to be. So I think you got to throw Marcus Freeman into that conversation as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think they all deserve credit for that. But yes, Gino Guidugli is clearly having an early impact with the quarterback room. I mean, you can't deny that. You can't look at him and say, well, it's just all Tommy Rees's recruiting. No, because they're all better versions of themselves. I mean, even Sam Hartman is better than I thought he was going to be in the way he's throwing them, consistency, the accuracy. I think Coach Guidugli deserves some credit for that. Just like you also can't ignore the fact that Tommy Rees played a big role. And look, all the guys on campus right now, not one of them deserves credit, is here because of Gino Guidugli. Not one. They're here because of Tommy Rees. Now it's up to Gino Guidugli to take the play of the quarterback room to the next level, and that's what we haven't seen in a long time. And that's where Coach Guidugli is going to get a lot of credit, in my opinion. So, so they all deserve credit for it. And hopefully Tyler continues to be that guy because he's got all the talent in the world, folks, whether it's this year or next. And if he's not the starting quarterback this year and he stays at Notre Dame, not only will he be a dude down the road, but he's going to have a big say in how good Sam Hartman's going to be next year. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Sam Hartman has never, ever been through a practice where the guy behind him spun it. And I'm talking, yes, and no, I have not forgot about Jamie Newman, who was one of the most overrated quarterbacks that I've seen in a long time.
Future first-round pick, Jamie Newman. Yeah.
Guy who can't complete 50% of his passes against a team with a pulse, But, like, he's never had a kid spin it the way that guys like Tyler Buckner and Kenny Minchie spin it. And that's going to make him better because Sam can't afford to have a day where he's like, you know what, I don't feel like being here today. No, you may not feel like it, but, you can rest all you want over there on the sideline. He's got to bring it every day, and that's what I love about this team, Ryan. Look, I think Tobias Merriweather could be a star, but you know why he's going to be even better than maybe he otherwise would have been? Because he can't take a day off. Because he's got Lorenzo and Caleb Smith and Dion and Braylon and Jaden and Rico, Jaden Thomas, the younger Caleb Smith shows up, all breathing down his neck. Hey, you don't want to do it? Fine, coach, let's go 12 personnel. Holden Stace wants to be in the game. Hey, coach, we're going to go 21 personnel because Chris Tyree wants to be in the game, or Chris Tyree's a slot, or whatever the case may be. So we're just going to move Jaden Thomas outside if you don't want to bring it, Tobias. But that's the thing but Tobias is going to bring it because he is a worker. But even if you're a worker, having that push is huge, huge. Yep. And if a guy doesn't want to work, then okay, it's fine. We got somebody else. And that's what I love about the depth on this football team is, man. Hey, Maris, do you want to bring it today? Fine. Hey, Nolan, get in there.
Yeah.
Hey, Jalen, get in there. Hey, Prince, get in there. Hey, Drake Bowen, get in there. Hey, Jaden Osberg, get in there. And that's what I like about this team, Ryan, is there's a lot. It's young. A lot of that talent that we're talking about is young. But there's a lot of talent on this football team, man.
No doubt about it, man.
A lot of talent on this football team. It is a fun time to be a Notre Dame fan.
There's no doubt about that. Kind of like you and Vince yesterday, Brian. I'm trying not to get too amped up early.
Yeah,
we're here, man.
Because it's spring, right? And they haven't played a game, and they haven't lost a game. And the quarterbacks haven't thrown an interception that we've seen yet, or whatever. Yep. And you're just like, look, I don't want to get too fired up because we're not even halfway through spring ball. But then you're just like, good Lord, these guys look good. It's like, okay, calm down.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's a better place to be than next year. Like, because last year was like, if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, and if this happens, they're going to be pretty good.
Yeah. Yep.
And, but somebody on the message, I think it was O'Neill, said this on the message board. He's like, but you kind of had to hit the inside straight for it to work. And this year it's like, if this guy and this guy don't want to pan out, that's fine. You're good. You're set. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And, like Logan Diggs is a little banged up. Nobody's talking about it. Why? Because, fine. He'll be back in time. It's March. He'll be fine. And they're loaded. They're running back anyway.
Yes.
So it's a fun place to be.
Oh no, we have to play Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne
shucky
and
darns.
Jeremiah Love. Oh
yeah,
man.
exactly. I was talking, and Ryan, I've said this to you, and I believe this, and I was talking with somebody today whose football knowledge I respect a great deal, and I said, Notre Dame is fortunate that Jabron Payne got injured, because if he didn't get injured in high school, he's at Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State right now.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't have flipped him from those they could flip him from Indiana because he got overlooked and understandably because of the injuries.
Sure.
Jabron Payne's a good football player. And we got to see. I just haven't seen him play like that guy since he was a sophomore. We'll find out in the next couple of weeks if he's that guy again. But if he is, all of a sudden your really good running back room just got even better.
Yeah.
And Dylan McCall's going to look like even more of a genius because he fought to get the kid here. Even though they didn't need a running back in the class because they already had Jadarian Price.
Even as a sophomore, he averaged like over 10 yards a carry or something like that, man. Like Jabron was really good.
In Cincinnati, right? Like playing in Cincinnati, he wasn't playing like some tiny podunk, Western Buckeye League or something like that, right? He was playing in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
He's got skills. We just got to find out if he can be that guy again.
Yep.
And that's going to be the key. But the talent's there, and that's what you love about this team. Like, if I have to play Jabron Payne at some point in time, I'm not like, oh, my God, we're putting a borderline walk on a game. I'm like, yeah, okay. We're going to be all right. Like, let's just say worst case scenario, you don't have Logan Diggs, you don't have Audric Estime, you don't have Jadarian Price, you don't have access to Chris Tyree. Mm-hmm. If you go to a game this year and you've got Chris Tyree Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne as your two running backs, Jeremiah Love and your Jabron Payne as your two running backs, guess what? You're fine.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're okay. You're going, especially with that offensive line, you're going to be all right. Yes. And that's a great place to be. You know how far we've come to where in 2019 it was Tony Jones Jr. and
nothing else. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, boy, things have come a long way in a short period of time.
And we had to leave that Georgia game where it's just like we knew we were going to be able to run the ball. It was like, oh, great! Yeah. I'd love that. Thank God.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. Well, anyway, Ryan, that's going to take us. Why don't you take us out of here, man? That's going to do it for today's show.
Yeah, we want to thank everybody for joining us live today. Again, Brian dropped some great intel, some spring intel on the offensive side of the football. He'll have the defensive intel over the next day or two. So if you want to make sure to tap into that, boards.irishbreakdown.com. We'll be back later tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time for IB Nation Sports Talk. So make sure you tune into the channel. How do you do that? Hit that notification bell, share this podcast, hit that like button, and of course, always visit irishbreakdown.com as we continue to pump out a ton more team and recruiting content. Want to thank you all so much. We'll catch you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.